If you have a golf ball-sized consciousness, when you read a book, you'll have a golf ball-sized understanding. When you look out, a golf ball-sized awareness. And when you wake up in the morning, a golf ball-sized wakefulness. But if you could expand that consciousness, then you read the book, more understanding. You look out, more awareness. And when you wake up, more wakefulness. It's consciousness. And there's an ocean of pure, vibrant consciousness inside each one of us. And it's right at the source and base of mind, right at the source of thought, and it's also at the source of all matter. This pure consciousness is called by modern physics the unified field. That allows any human being to dive within, experiencing subtler levels of mind and intellect, and transcend and experience this ocean of pure consciousness. It's at the base of all mind and all matter. And it's not the intellectual understanding of this field, but the experiencing of it that does everything. It's consciousness.
The sky's so far away tonight, but I can't lose this one, get a pride of a falling night. Thought that I was fit to fight for us to be. You gave me life for loving me. Tell me, where did we go so wrong?
Raw consciousness does not require a savior, but rather, raw consciousness requires only knowledge of oneself and the power to access it. Remember this, as we unlock an even greater gnosis from beyond the veil.
From the Pacific Northwest, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm Chris Gio. I will be taking you beyond the veil this evening. I'm joined by my lovely wife and co-pilot, Mrs. Gio.
Good evening, everyone.
And we have an incredible show for you tonight. One of our dear friends, longtime friends, Guy Kneedler, is going to be joining us here in just a few moments. Guy was the one who Dolores Cannon kind of passed the reins to before she passed. And, we only had Dolores on the show one time, and it was only for an hour. She managed to fit us in her very, very, very busy schedule, and she passed away shortly after that. But we've had Guy on many, many, many times in the past, and he's kind of picked up where she left off and really expanded on a lot of her work. So we're going to get into a lot of that this evening. We're going to get into some of his latest work, catch up with what Guy has been up to, and he's been traveling, and it's the middle of the night where he is, and we actually had to wake him up, which I did not know that. Otherwise, we would have scheduled it for another time. But Guy said, no. It's more important to get this message out tonight to the audience than it is to sleep or reschedule or do anything like that. So we greatly, greatly appreciate that.
We
do. Anything from Mrs. Gio?
It has been so long, I think, since we've had him on. I don't think we've ever had him on since we've been on Beyond the Veil on YouTube. I really don't. I think
we did.
Really?
We
have
did.
we? Oh,
we
okay.
have.
But it has been quite some time. So
it has. So I don't want to make the intro too long because we've already kept Guy waiting. So we'll bring him on here in just a moment.
Definitely.
My dear traveler, the purpose of raw consciousness is never to destroy. It is always to create. build bridges, create happiness, and bring forth new life. We must live in the hope that mankind will draw together, and that we better understand each other. The more that we awaken, the easier this will become. Now rise, follow your conductors, and fear no danger as you step beyond the veil.
All right, so Guy Kneedler is joining us. We're probably going to keep the interview a little bit shorter because it is an inconvenience for everybody. However, I'm going to get after the show with some of my flat earth friends, and I'm going to ask them if they can resync the sun for us so we can all be on the same time zone, because people in the chat are saying it's 4:30 o'clock where they are, at 4:30 in the morning where they are. Here it's 8:30, it's the middle of the night in other places. We all need to be together in the same time zone with the same moon over us and the same evening, because this is the time this evening, ladies and gentlemen, just kind of sit back, relax, and open. I don't like to use that term, open your heart, clear your mind, and just focus and meditate on the ideas we're going to be speaking about tonight. So
exactly. Along with his healing abilities, his spiritual associations, Guy Kneedler's spiritual associations include being able to channel information from spirit, including constant contact with other entities within our multiverse, and his higher self and guides. It is the channeling that has resulted in The History of God, one of his books, and produced 6 additional books. As a method of grounding, he practices and teaches Aikido. He is a 6th Dan national coach with 38 years of experience and is currently working on the use of spiritual energy within the physical side of the art. So that's also an interesting topic that we can get into. Welcome to the show, Guy.
Good evening and good morning to those who are in my side of the world.
good evening, good morning, and good night,
and
wherever you may be. Yes.
Greetings.
You know, it has been a couple of years, maybe even longer, since we've had you on. How have things been going on since then? Tell us a little bit about your latest work, please.
I think it's probably 2017 since we last talked, and certainly that may be what Sherry thinks, and I think she might be right as well.
Has it really?
Since then, there's been 2 books.
Mm-hmm.
Time just flies. Oh my God!
Yeah,
you know,
it's been a while.
Yeah, we've had, you know, we've kind of journeyed left, journeyed right. Cherie's had 3 shoulder surgeries.
Uh-huh.
Everything's kind of spun out of control, and then now here we are back at a stable place. But I'm glad to hear that you have been just kind of, still putting the material out there, putting it together, and all of that. I guess let's jump back a book first. Tell us about that one, and then we'll get into the latest one.
Well, I believe that we just published the Origin Speaks when we had our last show, and the Origin Speaks went into a lot of detail about what the origin is, which is our ultimate creator, that which created our creator, obviously the source entity, which is where we are right now, where the multiverse is positioned within. And that was quite an in-depth book. And then the next book was basically a book that I didn't expect to happen at all. It was a complete shock and surprise because my wife Anne had died some years before from a brain tumor. She'd been battling with it for about 9.5 years, and she came through and she said, "Oh, we've got to talk about the incarnation process." And I thought, well, what can I say about it? Because there's lots and lots of books about incarnation. But it turned out that although we used common themes, things like what's a life plan, things like what's the end of life review, for example, the detail that came through took it into a completely different level and a completely different direction as well. So although it's got common themes and chapter headings that people would understand and can relate to, we went into a completely different level of detail, which has really opened my eyes even further to how complex the work is that not only do we do when we're here in our incarnation, but also the work our guides and helpers do to support us in our incarnation, making sure that we're in the right place at the right time, in communicating and interacting with people, with other incarnate individuals in the right way for the right experiences to get the right evolution level, and also be in the right environment as well. That was unbelievable, really.
Wow. So essentially, well, first of all, let me say this, because I remember you mentioning back in 2013, 2014, because you were on the show pretty close to the passing of your wife and twin flame, and I remember how shocking it was to hear that information, particularly because your frequency wasn't really resonating that type of sorrow or low frequency or anything like that. Like I wouldn't have even felt it just feeling your frequency. And then you let me know how you handled all of that and how you went through that. And now that separation has actually turned into an even deeper connection than there was in the physical plane. Can you go into that briefly? I mean, I don't want to go into it too much, but if you can go into it briefly for maybe people who have experienced that kind of loss and how things kind of transformed between 2012 and 2020.
Well, it's even for spiritual people, it's difficult to accept that those who are around us physically have departed and we're on our own. And the reason for that is because we are so focused on being in the physical, we're sort of so immersed in our incarnation that we've completely detached ourselves from who and what we are. So if we can reattach ourselves to who and what we are, we start to realize that the incarnation period is simply really is a brief moment in time. It's not even a blink of an eye in real terms, in terms of what we do and what we experience when we're in the energetic. So reconnecting with the energetic and understanding who and what we are from a really profound way makes us realize that incarnation isn't important. It's important to do things and be responsible for what we're doing and how we do it. But in terms of, associating with loss, we start to understand that it can become a joyful thing, because we recognize that those who we love have gone back to the environment that they naturally reside in. In terms of a frequential understanding, try and think of it this way. If we normally exist in the air on land, we have all of our senses and our abilities. We can communicate in a lot of different ways, including all of our mechanical ways, such as via the internet and telephony. But if we don a diving suit and we go underwater, we drastically reduce our ability to communicate. And so the interaction with the environment underwater with the diving suit on is really reduced, significantly reduced, to the point of, although our hearing is increased because sound travels faster through a solid object or a liquid object, it's everything else, such as our taste, our ability to move quite quickly. So when we come back out, if we realize that when we come back out again, we regain all of our senses and even our ability to remember things in a higher frequency, and how much freer we feel when we're back into the air rather than being in the water. If we can overlay that on the terms of how it feels to be back in the energetic, we start to think in a joyful way, and start to think that we can detach ourselves from the physical experience whilst being in the physical, and therefore we can continue to do our work. And if we're able to work in a way where we can remain in contact, if necessary, with those who departed, then we can still do the work here whilst still being in communication and in contact with those who've moved on. And so it becomes, rather than a loss, it becomes a delight. And writing the book, The Dialogues, was a delight. And interestingly enough, I've just finished another book. The book that was the seventh book that was published was called The Curators. We can come to that later. I've just finished a book on healing, and I'm starting another book now, which is called the Uncreated Creations. And I'm noticing that Anne's energy is coming through there. Now, how much work I'll do with her, I don't know. It's going
Well,
to be specifically.
it's funny you say that, because usually YouTube will notify people in spurts, so our audience starts to build as the show progresses. Just as you said that, we got 111 people on the stream. So 111.
Yeah.
we have that number, that kind of synchronistic number. Now it's gone up to 112. But somebody in the chat room actually said during the while you were speaking that a friend of his lost his twin about a year ago, and he's basically shattered. And I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience, and I wish I would have talked to you a couple of years ago, because Cherie has had 3 shoulder surgeries, and they've been very, very rough on both of us. And I felt myself in that really low frequency and almost even disconnected kind of space because of everything that we were going through. Everything became all about the physical, no spiritual, nothing like that, because we were focusing on pain and recovering and shoulder surgeries and all of that. And I was having to also take on all the extra responsibility as well, that I found myself in a very stressful and depressed kind of situation. Finally got myself out of it. But yeah, I mean, even without even the loss of the twin flame, even the loss of the twin flame connection temporarily because of these heavy experiences, plus physical loss and all of that, your words have made me realize there's a much different way to go about this, a much different way.
Well, it sounds to me like what you're saying, Guy, is that the emotions, even of the overwhelming emotions, the negative emotions of losing your twin flame or losing somebody incredibly close to you that you were spiritually close to, those are actually part of that physical reality, and that if you not do away with them, but if you accept them as a physical manifestation that is not part of the picture at all when it comes to the energetic connection that you had with that person, then you can, it's not that you move on with your life, it's that you move on in the energetic without having all of that negative emotion attached to you, and pulling it along like a ball and chain. Those emotions are part of the physical that you put down and say, you know what, that's not what she is to me. That's not part of this. That's part of the physical. That's part of the senses of the body and the mind, and that's not what she's about now. What she's about is the energy, and she's in the best possible place that she could be. And it's interesting when we have, Terrence McKenna said it really well one time. He said, when you tell somebody, do you see what I mean? That's a very deep statement, because we don't see what the other person means 90% of the time. We don't see what the other person means because we can't, energetically, we don't see what they see. We don't feel what they feel. But when all of that is taken away, all of the physical boundaries between people, and even all the emotional boundaries between people, then you can just be in the energy together, and then you do see what the other means, and you feel what the other feels, and I think that's a beautiful way of dealing with loss, and I want to
well, I mean, we keep calling
commend you on that.
We keep calling it loss, but
it's not really
is it
loss?
It's transformation.
Yeah,
and
transformation.
As you said, Guy, I totally relate to what you said about the suit and being underwater.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm in this body, and this body is foreign, and we're very, very much diminished. But when one of us becomes undiminished and in our true form, we mourn them instead of celebrate them.
Right.
Well, that's it. I mean, with the example of the listener with the twin, I mean, that is a different level of feeling of loss, because twins have the same soul but share between two bodies. So it's like half of you've disappeared. So whereas a soulmate is a function of your true energetic self or your higher self, splitting parts of it into two bodies separately. So there's two projections of sentience and energy, two souls, if you like, in two different bodies, but from the same higher self or true energetic self or Godhead, as the Hindus say. When you have a twin, it's one of those projections of sentience and energy that's then shared between two bodies, and so it doesn't have to be the same gender. By the way, it can be male and female twins and those sorts of things, and it can even be a different mother as well. But the thing is, in that condition, if you do lose, one of you goes, it's like half of you's gone, because the other half is back in the energetic. Whereas in terms of, a soulmate or a sympathetic soul, which is a soul that you've worked with before in previous incarnations, we still feel the loss and the sorrow. But if we, work on ourselves, create a high level of frequency whilst incarnate, we can still communicate with them. Obviously, it's not nowhere near the same level of depth and detail and competence and including all of the empathic, telepathic, and all the sensory understanding that we can get in the energetic that we don't get here. It's not the same level at all, but we still can communicate with them. It's a little bit like being able to communicate via letter rather than using a video telephone, if you think of it in those sort of ways. So although we're communicating by letter, we can still communicate with them, whereas when we're in the energetic, it's like instantaneous telepathy, as an example. And so being here, being a higher frequency, we start to be able to use the telephone rather than a letter. So working ourselves is better, and realizing that they're still there, and they've got whatever they're doing when they've back in the energetic is what they were doing previously. They're working on experiencing, learning, and evolving, but just in a different way. Being in the physical is a bit like getting into a motor car. If you think about the soul as being like us now as human beings, and our body, our human body is like a car. I mean, we jump in and out of cars, or buses, or trains, or planes, on a regular basis and daily. So if you think about just moving out of a car and going into the fresh air is like moving out of an incarnation and going back to the energetic, then we can see that it's actually moving around, changing the location of our sentience and the energy associated with our sentience is a really regular thing that we do. And going into a lower frequency environment, and experiencing it in the most profound way we're supposed to, which is to be part of it, experience things like resistance, emotion, hardship, joy, love, in the way it's supposed to be experienced, in a denser frequency body of energy, the human body, or other physical forms that are within the physical universe, is the only way to do it. But we move in and out of these bodies of energy. We move in and out of these cars, so to speak, these are the other vehicles for travel, for experience, on a frighteningly regular basis that we think is a long time, but is actually nothing at all. And so if we can start to realise that we're actually moving in and out of different vehicles, and that part of us or a soul that we work with has moved out of that vehicle and is doing something else before they get into the next vehicle, then it makes a real difference in how we start to relate to the loss process. Because although we lose them because we miss them, but they're still there. It's just that they're not in that car anymore. They've moved into another location before they get into the next car.
That's very well said.
It is.
So, in your latest book, if I'm correct, and I'm not familiar with it, but you detail the reincarnation experience and the after-death experience. Is that correct?
In the End dialogues, yes, it goes through the process really from soup to nuts. So we have, from the point of view of being incarnate, to the point of view of the body demising and the things that affect it when it's demising, and how people do leave this incarnation or choose to leave this incarnation. It goes through things like reorganising and re-recognising who and what we are, because we do get somewhat programmed into being physical. If you think about the sentience and the energy that we call the soul, that I call the aspect, a smaller aspect of our higher self or true energetic self, is almost cut off, not totally, but almost cut off from what it is. And so it creates this ego, this personality that starts to associate itself with the human form, and starts to believe it's the human form rather than what it really is. And so we have to sort of disengage from that and start to lose these preconceived ideas of what we are and what happens to the the sentience, the soul, after the physical body's finished its job or demised. And so it does, with some people it does take time, because we have these preconceived ideas of what it's going to be like, heaven or hell, as an example. So we create an environment around ourselves, and that needs to be dissolved so we can start to work properly. Some people go back into the energetic and they're fine, and they move back in. It's seamless. They continue to do what they did before they incarnated, as if it's, as if they just stepped off one bus and moved into a building, for instance. Whereas other people become so integrated with their incarnation that they create an environment that supports their incarnation whilst they disincarnate. And that takes a bit of time sometimes to dissolve, and the guide and helpers help that. But when they've done that, then they have to go through this life review business. And there's lots of different books on the subject, but it's a really in-depth process, because it's not just the incarnate aspect or soul that has to go through this review. It's the guide and helpers as well. And so they have to look at how well the incarnation went, what was achieved versus the life plan, what was overachieved, what was underachieved, what can be done next time, how well the communication between the guide and helpers and the incarnate soul worked, what they did well, what they could have improved on, what processes and what techniques didn't work, what worked superbly. So it's a massive review that doesn't just include the soul; it includes every entity that's working with us as our backup team, so to speak, whilst we're incarnate. And that's a huge process as well. It includes things like sometimes it includes things like raising our frequencies. If we've subjected ourselves to some heavy drugs, which really lower our frequencies significantly, that can also affect us when the soul leaves the body. So that needs to be sort of dealt with, and sometimes souls have to be sort of quarantined a bit before they can reintegrate with the true energetic self, go into communion with it. But when all these things are sorted out, then there's a lot of work happens in terms of what's happening next, and what can they do to increase their experience in the next incarnation. And then we start to work with, which souls can we work with? Where in the physical universe can we go to augment the previous experience? Can we do it again exactly the same way, but with a slightly different angle to it? And we do things. Sometimes we do things 3 or 4 times to overcome things like addictions to the physical, which we call karma, and sometimes just to see what happens if we do it this way rather than that way. So we start to plan where we're going to go and which physical family we're going to incarnate into, and the environment is going to be there, what the challenges are, and how we might move forwards. And within that, there's the life plan. I mean, people talk about the life plan as being a bit of a dichotomy, because if you have a life plan, we don't have true free will. But my understanding is the life plan is simply a series of goals that we agree to, or want to do, or desire to do.
Guy, can I jump in for a second, because we're going kind of fast, and there's a couple of ideas that I wanted to touch upon. First of all, I just wanted to say that I completely agree with you that we manifest our not only reality here, but our reality after the fact. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you really think you're going to go to hell, you're going to go to hell. You're going to create that until you realize that you have become, that you are the creator of your own reality. Likewise, the heaven, going and worshiping God and bowing and doing all of that. That was really, it was really confirmation for me to hear that, and living in that higher frequency and understanding that both here and there. The other thing I wanted to touch upon, which is what caused me to interrupt you, is somebody said that you had mentioned 3 days after death. The soul stays in the body for 3 days after death. Is that correct? Because if it is, that sounds like the 3 days of darkness that we hear about.
It is true. It takes 3 days for for the soul or the incarnate aspect to detach itself properly energetically from the body. It's the soul is integrated in a really complex and energetic way. The gross physical is only 30% basically what we are. We have a number of different frequencies that have templates that allow the gross physical to exist, and the soul has to detach itself from those templates via the soul, either to remove its sentience from the soul seat, as the soul is a word that Barbara Brennan used. It has to detach its energies that control or animate the body from the Tantien, which is like a junction point, an energy junction, and then those two things have to go back to something called the core star, which is the point of where the sentience and the energy and the energies that can animate the body coalesce together and then join into the body. And then it has to disassociate itself from that and move back up the Hara line, which is basically a energetic tube that allows the sentience and the energies associated with it to move into the physical without losing its coherence with and connectivity with the true energetic self or the higher self, and then move back to it. And that takes time. that takes some sort of process. And although the sentience moves up this energy tube that we call, this very minute hypodermic sized energy tube we call the Hara line, and some individuals do get the feeling of this like moving through the tunnel and the tunnel of light at the end of it, etc., etc. That is something that the sentience experiences almost instantaneously, but the disconnection of the energies that animates the body does take this time to disassociate with it. Now, there's a bit of a dichotomy here, because some religions, for instance, like to cremate the body or bury the body or break the body up, for instance, and feed it to animals, such as in the Tibetan ways of doing things, within the first day. And that requires a significant piece of work to accelerate the removal or the detachment of the integrated soul with the gross physical and the energies associated with the gross physical to if you like move around these 3 days. But I'm just being told actually that the only way they can do this is because the soul already leaves. The soul, although the body demised like a day ago, and the funeral or the cremation's like a day after the body died, I'm told the soul actually starts to detach before then, so it's still 3 days. So although we might have like Uncle Sam, for instance, who dies on Tuesday and is cremated on Wednesday, you think, wow, there's only a day there, what's happened to his soul? Actually, he was starting to detach on Sunday, and so by the time his body physically dies, the sentience and the energy that is his soul has already gone. So this day later that they do the cremation is fine. So and souls do it in different ways. I mean, things like dementia and Alzheimer's is another physical function of the soul slowly detaching itself from the body. And so when people say, "Oh, we can try and solve Alzheimer's or other diseases that affect that result in the brain shrinking, for instance, like dementia," we're never going to solve that, because the soul is the way the soul is leaving the body is slowly, and so the part of the control center that animates the body, which is the brain, starts to lose its function.
That is fascinating. You had mentioned the life review. And I've always suspected that when you're working out karma, which some of us aren't here to do, some of us are here to actually do something, for a specific purpose. But I think most of the people here are here to work out different karmas and karmas in this life and past lives and all of this. Part of that life review process includes experiencing your life, but experiencing from other people's perspective to understand how you made them feel, things like that. What do you think about that particular idea in and of itself?
Well, karma is something we accrue through interacting with anything within the physical universe, not just here on Earth, but on other locations as well, other planets and other galaxies, in other frequencies. Obviously, the higher the frequencies we incarnate into within the physical universe, the less chance of being attached to certain experiences, thoughts, and behaviours within the physical. But being where we are right now, in the lowest of the frequencies, the first three frequencies associated with the physical universe, we do start to get attached and addicted to certain states of being or feelings or senses, and things like alcohol and smoking and drugs and certain sort of physical practices, and certainly adrenaline junkies, those sorts of things. But also things like needing to have status, needing to be have position, needing to have certain levels of material wealth. All of these different things. All of these are addictions to being in the physical, and in some terms, we interact with individuals in a non-efficient way, and that can create a link between us, this karma between two people, for instance. And sometimes the best way to detach that karma between another soul is to experience what they've experienced from their perspective. So it's just when we come back into a different life, or we sometimes experience the same thing from the opposite perspective in the same life, to negate that link with them, to negate the karma. And so we sometimes do things by mistake. We sometimes do things by design or desire, which means that we do interact with individuals to experience one side of the coin and then experience the other side of the coin, and therefore we get arguably a more complete understanding of a certain experience that's going to allow us to evolve in a more accelerated way. So for instance, if we experience one person's interaction with their environment and others around them, in terms of their physicality, they may be disabled, and then we're disabled ourselves, then we've got the ability to understand that. But if we do something wrong with somebody, and they're upset by it, but we feel great, and then something happens where we experience it the other way around, where something similar is given to us or done to us, and we feel shocked or horrified, and the other person feels great, then we've experienced the other side. So that's where we have this karmic link, where we have to sort of experience, do unto others as you would have do unto you. That's a way of saying, if you don't want to, you need to experience the opposite if you're going to break a karmic link. Whereas, but with most karma, it's individualized. It's us interacting with the physical and not being detached from it. So when we come back to this feeling about what we feel about losing a loved one, if we attach to it, if we attach to the physical, we get addicted to missing that person. We're still in the physical. If we higher frequency and we detach from it, we send them love, and we're joyful about the fact they've moved on, and therefore we don't get detached to it. So we remove this link to low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions associated with being in the physical, because we're thinking, behaving, and acting in a high frequency way. And so if we can do that, we can be in the physical but not of the physical, and therefore negate karma, basically. And if we work really hard on ourselves, we can leave this incarnation in a karma-free way, provided we understand how to think, behave, and act and interact with others within their environment as well. It's hard work, but it can be done.
That is that's very deep and
Insightful.
very insightful, very wise. Wow, Guy, I really missed your energy. I can't believe it's been since 2017 that we've spoken.
Very kind.
And it's amazing how people like our listeners who've been with us for years, I see them in the chat in every show. They're opening up in the chat room now about things that they've kind of kept to themselves. And death has been something that has not been too much in my sphere. My mother passed away. I lost my grandparents, the typical stuff. I lost my mother way too early, but for the most part, I haven't experienced too much of that type of loss in my lifetime. I have kept myself pretty isolated, though. I make very few friends, only the ones that I'm sure are going to be here for a long time. But maybe it's a previous life karma kind of thing. But my point is, though, that a lot of times we don't even consider what others are carrying around, and then shows like this actually speak directly to them. Aurora in the chat mentioned earlier she lost her 5-year-old daughter and her husband, and she said that this conversation is so healing for her. And I just want to say, wow, that's I'm so sorry to hear that, but just, it's inspiring that people go through those experiences, and then those experiences don't become them, but rather they grow from those experiences and then help others in the healing process as well. So, thank you for sharing that, Aurora, for sure. But Guy, please take us away.
Yeah, I mean, in that particular instance where the listener lost 2 loved ones, a partner and a daughter, we have to realise that part of the life plan was to experience incarnation with those 2 individuals for the period of time that they did, and then move into a different experience. And so they chose to be on this planet in this incarnation for the period of time that they did, and then depart together. Now we choose various different ways of departing. Some of them we would classify as being horrific from a human perspective, and some of them peaceful from a human perspective. Horrific is like being involved in, a train crash or a plane crash or something, or experiencing a terrible debilitating disease. So when we detach ourselves from how they've gone, and we start to realise that they've chosen that way because it's fast, and it's allowed them both to go at the same time, then we start to realise that the whole point of them going was that they've gone now, and we've got to continue. We've got to continue with the plan that we've got that doesn't include them. I mean, for instance, in Anne's case, I established that the whole point of us being together was to create the situation that I'm in now, basically, where I'm doing the work I'm doing now. She'd done her work. She'd introduced me to a different way of understanding things. Her father was very deep thinking. He was a senior research fellow within Birmingham University in working in metallurgy, for instance, and welding techniques. But he was also interested in, and wrote 3 books on, understanding from a scientific perspective what is in the energetic, what the worlds of spirit are, for instance. And so that sort of spurred me on to do certain things in terms of certain educational levels I achieved that allowed me to be able to write books and also interact with individuals who taught me certain things, like certain levels of healing and channeling and these sorts of things. So once that job was done, there was no longer a need for her to be here. And so the brain tumor in her case was the way that we interacted with each other in a different way, and then she departed. But she's still there. She's just in the energetic. And understanding that and realizing that the work that is happening now, in some instances, is partly due to the work that she's doing in the background. Things that happen are not just my life plan. There's assistance happening from the energetic to be able to do certain things. As I look forwards and sideways and backwards at what's happening around me and how things are happening, that you can't understand how the synchronicity has evolved. You start to realize, my guided helpers who are doing work, for instance, and they're pointing me in the right direction, they're getting other people to sort of interact with me. But there's also the Anne factor there, and she's also helping me to understand various different things, and also in terms of interacting with different types of people in different ways that I haven't done before, and learning how to work with that as well. So it's everything is understanding, everything is evolution, and understanding that those who've worked with us and departed are doing other things now, or might be in the energetic because they need to help us from the energetic, because now they've given us a springboard to continue our incarnation and our evolutionary condition, our learning experience and learning and evolving as a result of this incarnation is continuing. It's just that they're working in a different way. They're not in the physical. They're working from the energetic.
I want to say this. I've talked about this before, the loss of my mother. She went way too early. But what that did is, number one, it helped me to realize exactly who she was and see things that I couldn't see while she was here. And I didn't even see it immediately. What I had to do is I had to detach myself from the negative emotions surrounding it. Once I did that, then it was like a block was lifted, and I truly understood who she was and all of the sacrifices that she made for me on my journey to bring me to where I am now. And also her passing was like a release, because that was a point when I was about to start an entirely new path, and there was no way that I was going to leave my hometown where I was, because she was there. She wound up leaving. That kind of released us to travel all over the country and live in various places that was required in order to go on the next parts of the journey. So I think you're absolutely right that people come and go, and they leave because they don't have anything else to do, or sometimes that's the catalyst that it takes in order to push us in a particular direction. Both, I would say, is the case. They do what they need to do, then they leave, and then doors and opportunities open up after the fact that kind of push you in that direction. It's only when we hold on to that negative emotion, only when we hold on to that grief. We should go through a grieving process, we should, but we can't carry it around our entire lives. It does nothing but eat away at us and destroys us.
Absolutely. And, I also wanted to add, there was a really good point that you made a while back, Guy, and that's, your wife was suffering from a brain tumor, which was causing her an immense amount of pain. And it sounds like Aurora's family members, had they survived that accident, it could have been the case where they would have been in horrific pain for a very long time with no real end to it. And that's no way to live. That's surviving something horrible, but that's, not the most effective or wonderful, joyous way to live. And when you're just surviving. So a lot of times I think when people leave us, it's not just because, it's a catalyst for our own growth and our own paths. And it's not just, because they have, nothing else to do on this earth. It's also because living in that energetic field as energy is far more substantial to them at that point than continuing on inside of a vehicle that is no longer operating. So
yeah, let me get to a question real quick here. The Echo sent in a donation. First of all, thank you for the donation, Echo. He asked if you can speak briefly. It's a little bit off topic, but definitely in your field. If you can speak about the 9th chakra and how he can fix it. He didn't elaborate anymore. That's all he said. But maybe you can pick up on the energy.
The human body, in all of its 7 energy templates, has basically 7 groups of chakras. We have the root chakra, which is a vertically opposed chakra. The crown chakra is also a vertically opposed chakra. And then you've got the horizontally opposed chakras, which are the sacral, solar, heart, throat chakra, and the spiritual or third eye chakras. And they are associated with the templates that create the gross physical. The other chakras, the various different healers talk about other chakras, but in essence, there isn't other chakras. There isn't an 8th chakra. There isn't a 9th chakra. There isn't a 10th chakra. But there is a juncture where we go through a step down function. When we incarnate in the human body, we come from a significantly higher frequency that is usually in a different dimension within the multiversal environment. But to get that, to get the sentience and the energy into the lowest frequencies, it has to be sort of funneled down into these low frequencies, going from a high frequency to a low frequency. And so, although most individuals know that there's these 7 groups of chakras with 7 energy templates that create the human form, there's a bit of knowledge in the background where there's there's three other areas that are there, and they call them chakras, but they're actually not chakras. They're just step down junctures, where we go from being very high frequency to getting to the association with the human form and the incarnation. And so at the 10th frequency, there's like a step down juncture, which brings the energy, or compresses the energies that we are, the sentience, closer to those that are required to animate the human form. And then it goes down to the next location, next level, which is the 9th frequency level, to another juncture, which compresses it again, so to speak. And then we get down to another juncture, which is the 8th frequency, which compresses it down, so that the sentience and the energy that is the projected aspect from the true energetic self, we call our soul, can then start to integrate from the 7th frequency downwards into the location of the core star, separate out the energy into the Tantien to animate the body, and the sentience goes up to the soul seat, which is just behind the heart chakra junctions within the physical body. And so we get this instance where we have these step down functions, and these step down functions sometimes are classified as chakras, but they're not actually chakras as such. And we don't actually need to do anything with them, because they don't have the same functions of a chakra. A chakra is basically an energy receiver. It's a group of vortices, and the number of vortices is increased as we got the frequencies, that pulls in energy that allows the human form to exist, to manifest, to exist on the frequency levels that are necessary to create the gross physical vehicle. And so, although we have the gross physical vehicle, we have the other templates that allow the gross physical to be manifest. And those chakras exist. Although we see lots of imagery and lots of artwork and lots of reports back from people that say, these chakras exist on all these different levels, they can be observed from afar as being on all levels, but actually each chakra is predominantly working with one of the templates. So the root chakra works with the first template, what we call the etheric level, and then the sacral chakra works with the next level, which is the emotional body, etc. As we move up to the 7th chakra, we've got a chakra that works only on the 7th level. Now they are visible on the different levels because of the way they work, but they predominantly work on a frequency level that they are at. And then these other junctures, the 8th juncture, 9th juncture, and 10th juncture, are these step down functions that allows the energies and the sentience that is the soul to integrate and interact with the vehicle that we call the human body, and other vehicles that are in the physical universe as well. So they're not actually chakras; they're junctures. Chakras are pulling energy to allow these different templates to work. They're like energy receivers. Now, of course, we eat as well. We have physical form. We have physical food of plant type or animal type. But if we work on a higher frequency, we'd start to remove the need to eat physical food, and we can use the energies specifically that are received from the chakras on the 7 levels that the chakras operate on, to sustain and support the continued maintenance of the human form itself. So the chakras are different things. The chakras are energy centers that pull energy in. Certainly the major chakras are, and these other areas that are called chakras are actually just energy junctures. They're step down functions that allow the soul to integrate with the human form and become incarnate.
Excellent.
Very
Thank
well
you
said.
so much for answering that. So getting back to the topic of life after death. As a matter of fact, it's been almost an hour, so let's go ahead and take a top of the hour break. When we get back, we'll jump more into life after death. We'll talk more about reincarnation cycle as well, and many things that are beyond source and beyond the veil as well. So what do you think, Mrs. Gio?
I think this is a fascinating conversation, and I said in the chat earlier, even though I don't agree with 100% of what he says, I I know that everything he's saying comes directly from his heart, and that is the most important thing. And I
always say
that.
if you agree with anybody 100%, then
You're
really
insane.
not doing any critical thinking, because you're not thinking for yourself. You're just I resonate. I resonate
with a lot of what he's saying.
Yeah, for sure. So let's play a short clip, and we will be right back.
Greed has poisoned men's souls,
Either you're with us or you're with the enemy.
has barricaded the world with hate,
We need to build a wall.
has goose-stepped us into misery.
Oh,
and
people
bloodshed.
want to hear. They want to hear my music.
The machinery that gives abundance has left us in
All right, I could play that song.
Somebody
Somebody made a song request for Numb. That one's kind of low frequency. I wrote that when I was in I was in a really low frequency when I wrote that. I need to release some of this. I'm trying to get a few more tracks together before we release them. Before I officially release them, but by the time I release them, everybody's gonna already heard them 100 times over. So let's see, final mix downs. Where do I keep this? Masters, here it is. All right, this one's tuned to 432, but I don't know if I like it at 432. I may speed it up back to normal speed, but here you go. Can you tell me what I've become?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Can you tell me why I feel so numb?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Can you tell me what I've become?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Can you tell me why I feel so numb?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Can you tell me what I've become? Why do I feel so numb? Why do I feel like I want to turn the clock back to the point when it all begun? Can you please turn off the sun? Can you please turn off the stars? Can you please drop a nuclear bomb with enough megatons to see from Mars? I just want to turn the clock back, go back to that crossroad. I just want to turn it back again, make a left at the fork instead. I just want to turn the moon off, I just want to see it explode. I just want to see it turn black and delete it like dead code. I just want to bail and go somewhere. Not a single motherfucker even knows my name. No more shows, no YouTube fame. I just want to get the fuck up out this game. I just want to hit this DMT in peace. I just want to hit this DMT in peace. I just want to hit this DMT in peace. I just want to hit this DMT in peace. Can you tell me what I've become?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Can you tell me why I feel so numb?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Can you tell me what I've become?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Can you tell me why I feel so numb?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Yo. Now I'm in the studio. Yeah. Trying to record some verses. Nah, you're never bothering me. Love you too.
Fucking hell. I can't get no peace, I can't get no time. Cause if I don't release, I'm about to lose my mind. And if you don't leave me the fuck alone, I'ma fill you full of holes like Al Capone. If you really wanna be my Valentine, come and fuck with me just one more time. They'll be talking about the shit like Columbine. Oh shit, I'm still on the line. They don't feel my heartbeat, so I must be heartless. I take a hit of DMT, but I find no solace. Always try to go deep, but I can't grab knowledge, so I try to go to sleep. Now I'm spinning in thought loops. Now I'm looping and looping like all around, trying to touch sky, but I'm stuck to ground. Playing fast forward and I can't slow down, falling and bouncing around. Now I'm tossing and turning and burning and drowning and clutching and screaming and choking and heaving and stabbing and poking and shooting and bleeding and dying. I can't wake up, I'm dreaming. Can you tell me what I've become?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Can you tell me why I feel so numb?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Can you tell me what I've become?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
Can you tell me why I feel so numb?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
You've become a fucking asshole is what you've become.
I'm going to be honest with you.
prison, this reality, whatever you want to call it. I can't stand it any longer. It's the smell. If there is such a thing.
You know, it's funny how the frequencies shift, because I wrote this when I was in a low frequency, and I'm like, I just want to bail and go somewhere. Not a single motherfucker even knows my name. No more shows, no YouTube fame and all this. And here we are, like, with Guy Kneedler on, and I'm like remembering now, oh, this is why we do it. It raises the frequency of not only the people that listen, but it raises the frequency of us too.
Yeah, it does.
So it's funny because, you know, I jumped on and did a couple of shows, and I was thinking to myself, man, I can't even relate to these shows anymore. And then now I'm playing that music that I wrote several months ago, and I'm thinking I can't even relate to that music anymore. But yeah, I guess it's all part of the journey. It's all part of the journey. So let's get back into it.
My fellow travelers, always remember to walk uprightly and circumscribe your desires. As we travel upon the level of time, to that undiscovered state of consciousness, traveling to the place where once obtained, no traveler returns. The place of raw consciousness which awaits us when we are past beyond the veil.
All right, let's jump back into it. Maybe another half hour, maybe another hour with Guy Kneedler. I don't want to keep him too long, but the energy and the frequency is just so wonderful and loving.
It is.
And a lot of things that have been they've been forgotten about. Not forgotten, just they've been put on the back burner in lieu of the mission of just getting down to the nitty gritty and breaking down the matrix and all of that stuff that we talk about here on the show. But at the very base level of this, it's all about the love. We were on with Clyde Lewis just a couple of days ago, and he had us on for 2 hours. It was pretty cool. We have a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on here at Beyond the Veil, because we live streamed it, and so we were actually talking between the breaks. So if you haven't checked that out, check that out. It was a really good show. But we were talking about life is a glitch. That was the name of the show, and glitches in the matrix. And some of you guys and gals in the chat room were saying, hey, love is the code to hack the matrix. Love is the master reset code. And I thought, oh, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. I think love can be used as a form of manipulation as well,
it can.
though we've talked about here on the show. But when you have control of your consciousness and you have an understanding of your consciousness, then you wield the energies and the emotions of love and I don't want to say hate, because it's not a hate emotion, because hate is also polarized, but it's more of the emotion of a warrior standing in front of an adversary, which is the darkness in the realm, and looking at it tactfully and conquering that adversary. So I don't even think there is a term for that. Maybe determination, maybe assurance in yourself, like you're sure of yourself, you're sure in.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. I think it's love that you have for the people you're protecting from that force.
Yeah, and the love for yourself as well. So maybe it does all come down to love at one level or another. So I'm so glad that Guy has been bringing the love this evening. It's so very well, very much appreciated and very well received too.
It is.
So Guy, several different places we can go. We can stay on the life and death experience. We can move over to the topic of love. Where would you like to take us?
Well, last time we spoke, so it was probably just after the publication of the Origin Speaks, and so we've gone through some of the detail that there was in the next book, was the Iron Dialogues, but we've the book that's just been released is called The Curators, which you may have an interest in. I don't know about the listeners. We'll soon see on the feed that comes through. But basically, the Curators as a book is based upon my communications with Source, discussing those different entities that maintain the evolutionary efficiency of the multiversal environment that we exist within, and how it all works. And I found it unbelievably enlightening to find out that there's all these different entities that control things like different realities and different environments that are created from these realities, and they can chop and change, cut and paste different realities and change realities. And when I look around me, what's happened in the last sort of 5 years, it seems like we've moved from we've gone from one reality to a different reality. And I thought, I wonder if this is because we need to experience something like the things that are happening in around the world. Things like different political systems changing dramatically, from going from order to almost chaos, to experiencing different world events, different weather systems, different physical things, the health things like the viruses that are happening in China right now. And I was just wondering whether you're interested in discussing those, some of the subjects that are within that particular book, because one of the things that was interesting to me is that what we consider to be reality around us changes on a regular basis, either locally within ourselves or in a wider field within the individuals within our environment, and sort of more globally as well. And I was absolutely so surprised at getting the information as to how fluid things are and how things change.
If I can jump in for just a moment, I was watching an interview with George Lucas, and this was after he sold his franchise Star Wars to Disney. But he was talking about what he originally had planned for the 3 sequels that recently came out, which were going to go in a completely and totally different direction. And the prequels were actually building up to that. In the prequels, they were talking about midichlorians and how the Jedi have a high count of midichlorians within them. What he had planned for these last 3 sequels was that he was going to go into the idea that the midichlorians were actually a race of beings that lived in a microcosm that lived inside of us. So essentially, we're all a universe. We have these beings all living inside of us, and they're the ones that actually control reality. They're the ones that dictate everything, and we're essentially kind of like their puppets. We can break free of that control, but we're kind of their puppets. And it sounds like what you're talking about is very similar to that concept. Am I correct in that?
Well, it's the way you just described that George Lucas described it, where there's entities within entities, so to speak, is almost a way of describing how space exists within space, and the different frequencies and event spaces exist within each other, or without each other. So it's almost like George Lucas is connected in some way, and he's trying to express a level of understanding through his films that will help to educate us. But the level of understanding is limited to his own ability to understand, and his own education and his own expansivity. And this is the same with everybody. Some of us can only understand rudimentary maths, where other people can understand extremely complicated mathematics to enable them to record their ideas on quantum physics in a mathematical model, whereas most of us can just barely deal with our times table or our division of simple numbers or even fractions. And so in that respect, if you think of it that way, then what Mr. Lucas has been doing is what he wanted to have done was to show an alternative viewpoint, or an alternative idea on understanding how everything exists concurrently in the same space, in the same time. But this idea of a reality is over there compared to another reality which is over here, for instance, it doesn't work, because actually everything is happening concurrently. So all the different realities, all the different entities that exist in different frequencies, all exist in the same space at the same time or concurrently, and I think that's what he was trying to give us an example of. I think he probably had an idea of what it was, but then his ability to understand it created a condition where it was entities within entities. Which is not unreasonable, because there are entities that are sort of, almost universe-sized in other locations within the origin that exist within and without other environments as well. And so, an environment, for instance, in the example you've given us, that those entities exist within us, maybe at a quantum level. And so we think we're the bigger entity. We're in the macro level, so to speak. They're in the quantum or micro level, but actually, we might exist again in another entity that is in another entity that exists within the quantum level of those entities that exist within us. So we might be in a condition where everything appears to be completely like a Mobius loop type of existence, whereas in reality it's everything exists in the same space. It's just the way that the multiversal environment is created, in so much as we try to structure, as human beings, we try to structure things, and that's how I understand things. But as I work with things more, start to realize that there is no structure. It's just the structure is a way of understanding it. We're given levels of understanding of how things work and how entities interact with their environments, and how the environment is created, based upon our level of education and our current level of expansivity. But as we know more and experience more and understand more, that level of understanding and that level of being able to work on certain levels of detail increases, and our expansivity increases as well. And so I'm convinced that if Mr. Lucas at some point in his rest of his incarnation was more open, he would see more detail in what he's trying to express through his thought processes that could have been films.
Very well said. One of our listeners corrected me. It's actually not the midichlorians that were the race. It was the wills. And yeah, he's right there. I've said this a couple of times, and so this is the first time that somebody corrected me on that. I'm glad, because I want to keep it accurate. But and somebody else was saying what I was thinking while you were speaking is this sounds kind of like Russian dolls. There's really no way to describe it, but it's one after another inside. And it's funny because I kind of had this understanding as a child. I remember looking in science books and looking at pictures of supposedly the galaxies and the stars and all of that, and then looking at cells and thinking to myself, what if these cells are actually just galaxies inside of us? Here I am, like 5 years old, having these thoughts. I must have brought them in from previous incarnations, but I think there's something to it. When we're children, I think we're even more tapped in, because we're subjected to the Mindwipe of reincarnation. Oh, that's another thing I want to ask you about. The Mindwipe of reincarnation, but at the same time, we're not as programmed by our physical experiences here. So I think that we remember so much more. We just don't really realize it. I remember my father was always really negative about literally everything, and he used to drive me crazy. And I would think to myself, we manifest our own reality. Why is he so negative? He's manifesting all this negative reality. Now, it wasn't formulated like that, but it was just these feelings of disgust every time he would speak so negatively about something, and it was almost this understanding that he was creating all the negativity around. It's amazing, but take us away, please.
Yeah, I mean, we do create our own reality, and we create a reality which other people subscribe to as well, so it becomes a bigger reality, which is interesting. Now, in terms of the Russian doll, think of the Russian doll, the largest Russian doll, subsequently being inside the smallest Russian doll as well at the same time. That's the way to think about it, which is very interesting. In terms of creating an environment around us, we do it all the time. We do it based upon our belief systems, our knowledge systems, our experiential systems, and the belief systems are the ones that change our perception of our reality big time, because we tend to subscribe to certain thought processes based upon our own experiences and our desires for certain experiences and our expectations for those certain experiences and what we think is reasonable for our experiences. And we all do it. I mean, just before the break, Sherry talked about whether she totally agreed with some of the things I've said. No, that's fine, because we all have a certain level of understanding. As I said with the mathematics, not all of us can do the mathematics surrounding quantum physics, but most of us can do our add numbers together and subtract numbers together. And so it depends upon our level of understanding and experience, and therefore subsequent expansivity as to what we can understand and consider is reasonable and robust, based upon what's being presented to us, and how we can absorb it and work with it. And so the creation of a reality is based upon what we're comfortable with and what we want to work with, and what others around us are comfortable with and what they prefer, what they can work with, and how expansive they are, and whether we start to think in the same way. There's an old saying, birds of a feather flock together, and that's true with everything. People who think in low frequency ways or negative ways flock together. Though with certain subjects they flock together, with certain political statements they flock together, with certain ideals they flock together, with certain belief systems they flock together. And this creates sort of localized realities and larger global realities as well, where we start to exist in an overall structure, so to speak, but then we start to manipulate it locally or sort of city-sized or country-sized or globally, or even galactic and even universe-sized, even multiverse-sized levels of reality, and the spaces surrounding those different realities. And so we are what we create, what we think around ourselves. If we want to live in an existence that we classify as being joyful and happy, then we'll be in that all the time. If we want to exist in an environment where we're always arguing with somebody, or we're always creating a reason to argue, irrespective of what that subject is, then we'll always create that. And if we always want to be in a situation where we're observing things around us and not interacting, then we'll create that as well. And we do create everything that's there. I mean, the situations in the UK right now, and the situations, this is a political situation, and the political situations in Europe, and the political situations in the States, and everywhere else in the world, we've created through allowing it to be created. Everything that happens is created through us. And what we've allowed to happen because we're passive, or we've created and manifested because we're active within that creation of reality.
I completely agree with you.
Too.
One of the downfalls that people face is, and they don't realize this, but sometimes negativity is intoxicating to them. Mm-hmm. I call this psychic vampirism. However, people that aren't necessarily feeding upon the negative energy, I was speaking with somebody recently, they were going through a really, really, really difficult time. And I came to the determination that the reason they stay in that negative frequency is because they have become so numb that that's the only way they can feel. And they can feel the negativity, so they stay within that negativity and perpetuate that negativity. So there's a lot of traps that are set up for us, and it's amazing because the further we fall into these traps, the more we lose control of the ability to create something positive for ourselves. But at the same time, we are still creating our reality around us. So what would you say for those people? Because it's very difficult to see the forest from the trees. So when you're inside of it, you can't really recognize all this is going on. You're cynical about everything and just creating this negative space. But if you can just take a step out for a moment and just see what's going on, that's the only way, in my opinion, to get out of it. But what would you say to people like that?
It's difficult to get out of it because it's cyclic and is also a downward spiral. Negativity feeds negativity. It's easier to go down the frequencies than it is to come up the frequencies. It's extremely difficult to come up the frequencies. We have to work on ourselves consistently. Just when we think we've got it, we've made it, we start to get complacent, we start to drop down again. So things that we wouldn't have accepted as being reasonable in terms of our thoughts, behaviours, and actions. As a high frequency person, if we let go of ourselves and stop working on ourselves, we start to accept again things like throwing sweet wrappers out of the car window, for instance. And so people who are low frequency are really difficult to change, and you can't change them. They have to change themselves, and the only way you can change them is by being your normal high frequency self and sort of leading by example. And maybe some of your high frequency will rub off onto them. But in general, individuals who are low frequency, it's like being stuck in treacle. Unless they want to be saved, so to speak, they can't be saved. And although nobody's never saved in general in terms of their their overall evolutionary progression over all the incarnations that they do, it's difficult for them sometimes in one incarnation to pull themselves out. Some souls come into an incarnation and put themselves into a difficult environment to enable themselves to crawl out of that and become successful in various different ways to accelerate their evolution. But a lot of those souls don't make it. They stay in that environment. They stay in the negative, low frequency thought environment and thought processes that they place themselves into. So they experience a different experience, not the one they wanted to experience. So I think that I know that it's very difficult for individuals who are lower frequency, who do focus on the lower frequencies. They things like controversy, things like gossip and those sort of things are very easy to fall into. We all fall into that trap. That particular banana skin is really slippery, and to pull ourselves out and become more detached and a passive observer and thinking and understand the bigger picture of what's going on around us is extremely difficult and hard process to take. And each step is like walking up a ladder with a 300-pound rucksack on our backs, whereas it's easier to have that rucksack and go down the ladder.
Yes,
yes, it is.
I completely agree.
We have a question from Cosmos who said, I was wondering what your thoughts were or are about the demiurge / entities within entities and how to break free at death. I think we covered the second question a lot, but
I'm glad you asked that because I had another topic, and this is a great segue into that topic.
Okay, great.
So awesome.
Well, I think the thing is not to get worried about it. I mean, we do in my understanding, we don't have that condition to a point where we would notice it in our incarnation. It's more to do with the way in which the multiverse works, in so much as everything is in the same space all the time, and all experiences are occurring concurrently. So everything happens at one point, so to speak. So all our past, present, and futures are happening now. All of our actions, all of our experiences are happening now. All of the environments to support that, all the different universes within the different frequencies that are obviously within the different dimensions are in the same space now. So everything exists within and without each other. So if we try to focus on that too much, we wouldn't be able to focus on our role in this particular incarnation. So sometimes it's best not to worry too much about how things work around us. If we looked at or try to understand all the different failure modes that could exist in an airplane, we wouldn't get in one, for example. So, we start to realize that the more we focus on the things that we shouldn't be focusing on because we're here to experience the gross physical, then we start to detach from that ability to function here in the way we're supposed to function. So it's a bit like walking through a shopping mall and knowing that we've got to get to the end of the shopping mall and not get distracted by things that are in the shops that are in the shopping mall. So the objective is to walk to the end of the shopping mall and not pay attention to the shops, just carry on straight through. And that's the same with this incarnation. If we focus on too much of the spiritual stuff, we detach ourselves very effectively from the role we've got to play in this incarnation, which is supporting our evolution within the spiritual. So basically, my advice is, don't worry about it. Just get on with this life and enjoy it as much as you can do, and experience the experiences in the best way you can. And if you get a chance to improve your experience, then do so, and experiencing things in a different way.
Very well said. And I can attest for that firsthand. We moved out to the middle of nowhere, and I found that we were drinking a lot of ayahuasca, really just breaking different levels of consciousness and all of this. But my body was falling apart in the process because I wasn't focused on taking care of my body as well. I just completely forgotten about that. And I came out even more unbalanced than where I was going into the experience. However, I came out a lot more consciously strong and on point. But then I had to start over with the body. So it's important to definitely focus on everything. Last time we had you on, we had a lot of really big revelations. Huge things have happened in our journey. We went to Egypt. We drank ayahuasca in the Great Pyramid. We drank ayahuasca at the Temple of Hatshepsut, at the Temple of Isis as well.
In Philae, yeah.
We managed to hijack the temples and the pyramid overnight, which was an amazing experience.
It really was.
We filmed it all too, so we've got it all on film. But the reason I mention this is because the journey that we've been on has unlocked a lot of levels of understanding about the nature of reality and about what I termed non-player characters. I started to understand that energy work is essentially just code work. Shaman are moving the code around in a computer simulation, which brought me to the realization that not all humans that we encounter are they're sentient, but they're not the same type of consciousness that we are. It's like a video game in technological terms. I call it non-player character, which is like the shopkeeper that you encounter in a video game, or the enemies or the bosses or any of that.
It's what Dolores Cannon used to call, what was it that she called them? Background people.
It was a background. I mean, I had an understanding of another different type that Chris has just alluded to. I called the backfill people, but she called them the backdrop people.
Oh, backdrop people.
They
right.
were like the those individuals who would be on a painting in the back of a scene of a film, for instance. They're just there. They're part of the environment, but we don't interact with them. And so there's two different types. There's those that are just in the background, not the foreground, which are just there. Like I say, just they're the sort of extras on the film, so to speak. And there's another group of entities which are being allowed to incarnate that are of a different level, of different genre of sentience, and they're in between our level of sentience and the animals on the Earth's level of sentience, and they're called the backfill people, and they're backfilling for those individuals who've ascended to the next frequency level. So we need to maintain a certain mass or volume of incarnate vehicle here, so that those who are still ascending can or should we say, those are still working on themselves to increase their evolutionary level so that they can ascend, will ascend, but they don't get the shock of seeing the world population just diminish rapidly, because people just disappear, popping out of existence, going from this level to the next level, so to speak, working at a higher frequency level. And so they're being backfilled by a different genre, different quality level of sentience, different quality level of soul into human forms to sort of create the volume of incarnate entity on the planet, and you can see them. There's different. They don't have the same level of interaction with us. They can't interact. Sometimes they can't learn things properly. Their level of cognition is not the same as ours, and their ability to progress in some of the spiritual things isn't as profound as ours. But they can still be very successful. They can be very successful business people. They can be very successful sports people. They can be very successful personalities on television and other things. So they can be very physically successful, but in terms of their spiritual progression, they don't tend to be, because their frequency levels and their evolutionary level, therefore, are not the same as ours, so to speak, and so they're not as expansive. So they very much are immersed in their incarnation, and they can be quite rude sometimes. They can be quite very, very focused, and they can also be very deriding of those around them who aren't at their level as well.
Yes. So when we came to these realizations, and we started talking about this, people automatically pointed to Dolores Cannon and said, hey, Dolores Cannon talks about this. She calls them background people. So we started doing a little more research, and we came to find out that the Emerald Tablets of Thoth talk about the children of light and the children of men. The Bible talks about the children of men and the sons of men, men and sons of men. Helena Blavatsky talked about those with the divine spark, those without the divine spark. And I wanted to get your take on this. What it helped me do is it helped me come to the realization that, like you just said, we can't wake everybody up out there. And sometimes we have these people in our lives that are here to play a certain role because they're playing out a program. Sometimes it's a protective program. Sometimes it's a program to challenge us. Sometimes it's a program to just push things in different directions. But ultimately, that they exist, and they exist in mass, I would say. So, I know you just touched upon this. My thought was kind of interrupted because Cherie kind of jumped in and kind of finished
I'm sorry,
where I was.
Apologize.
But so yeah, no, it's a phenomenon that I've been observing. So yeah, take us away, please.
Well, you talked about the divine spark and those with the divine spark and those without the divine spark. Well, we're all divine. Even all incarnate entities are divine because we're all. In fact, everything is divine. Even the table that I'm sitting on right now is divine because it's all part of the structure of the multiverse, and which is part of our creator, the source. So everything is divine from that perspective. But in terms of the way to describe this demarcation between divine spark and no divine spark for an incarnate soul, I'll just say it's the level of sentience associated with it. Because the mass or the weight of sentience is important. So the higher the sentience quotient, so to speak, the more connected, the more able to connect, the more expansive a soul is. So if one is of a higher level of sentience, you could classify that as having more divinity than one who has a lower level of lower quotient of sentience. So they would have less divinity, but they are nevertheless both divine, and they are nevertheless part of source. It's just that the level of sentience associated with them creates a demarcation which can be classified as being one who is one level of sentience, or one genre of sentience, call it one with a divine spark if you want to, versus another one with a different level of sentience, call it those without a divine spark if you want to. And that's the way to think about it.
That makes total sense. I want to ask you about something that people were talking about earlier in the chat, and it kind of ties into all of this. Could the twin flame concept be used as a program? Somebody was saying, "Oh, it's just a program. It's just a program." A program to lure us into a kind of a reproduction kind of cycle or something like that, and. What I found is a lot of these connections sometimes they seem like they're good connections, but then there's these programs that are ran with people and they're I don't even know how to describe it. They were talking about it earlier in the chat, but what do you think about that idea of the whole twin flame concept being a program in and of itself?
My understanding of a twin flame is it's the same soul in multiple bodies. So you've got, let's say, 2 or 3 bodies, and the same soul is not divided, but linked into those bodies together. If you wanted to call the function of the sharing of that soul within those 3 bodies concurrently, a program, then that's fine. But I don't see it in terms of anything else other than the fact it's just the sentience and the sentient quotient that is a soul is in 3 bodies rather than one particular body. So I have difficulty getting my head around that. that it's a it's a program. It's simply a function. If a function's a program, that's fine. I can understand. I can relate to that. But
that actually makes sense. Yeah, because inside of a matrix or simulation or whatever. I mean, now I come from a simulation perspective, but it's so much bigger than a simulation, though. It's just that's the best language that we have to describe it. The ancients were describing it in the best language that they had. But you're right. Every function, everything within the simulation itself is a program in one level or another. I think it's up to the individual player. Again, I'm using my terminology. Individual player to determine what is a beneficial program for them and what is a program to break free from. We are constantly bombarded with programming from geopolitics to spirituality to all kinds of things like that. Religion, for example, big program. We opened up the show talking about how it's possible that when we die, we actually manifest the reality that we think is going to be the after life experience, simply because of all the programming that we've been running, and sometimes we hold on to these programs that are dangerous for us, but yet we still do for one reason or another. So maybe the truth is both. Maybe everything is the truth and nothing is real at the exact same time. It's just, this singularity paradox that we find ourselves in, which is the essence of life.
Well, that is a good way to describe it. I mean, I've just read a book. I was given a book for Christmas about understanding Japan, and the information, and the Japanese are really interesting as a race of people, because they don't conform to anything. We think they do, but they don't. And so the one thing, the only word I can use to describe the Japanese is contradiction, and everything is in contradiction, and that means that everything exists concurrently, and everything is acceptable, and everything is. There's no sort of compartmentalization for them. So saying that everything is exactly the right way to say it. There is no left or right or up or down or forwards or backwards. Everything just is. And the same with the Japanese. They just are. There's no sort of, you can't put them in a pigeonhole to say that they're this type of race or that type of race. They're everything and nothing. And that I feel is a superb example of what we really are. So if I was to look at a good example of what we really are when we disincarnate, I would say that we're everything and nothing, and that the Japanese race are probably the only race on the planet that are working in the same way as we work when we're in the energetic, whilst being incarnate. And it was a really excellent book. This Alan McFarland's, it's called Japan Through the Looking Glass. If you get a chance to read it, it takes some reading, but it really is excellent. Everything is acceptable. Everything is included. Nothing's excluded, or everything is excluded. It's brilliant. And this is a perfect example of how we really are in the energetic. So I think your comment about everything is but it isn't is perfect.
Oh, I'm working with a mixing engineer right now with a few songs that I put together, and one of them is really perfect for this moment here. But I guess I can take the time to read you the lyrics real quick, ladies and gentlemen, because it's exactly what we're talking about here. Let me pull it up real quick. I really like this song. I have a rough mix down of it, but I mean, I think this goes to show, here it is. I'm a child of the light and a product of darkness, a peaceful man, but I'm far from harmless, always on point, always the farthest. I write these rhymes, but I'm not an artist. Right on time, even though I'm timeless. I lost my mind, but I'm still not mindless. By design, screaming at the silence. I paid the price for everything priceless. And I do it all again at the stroke of a pen till the end of the age, like the Mayans said, anticipating, illuminating, activating. It goes on like that. The point of the lyrics were, I'm everything and nothing at the exact same time. And, you know, I paid the price for everything priceless. You know, how do you pay the price for everything priceless? But that's what we find ourselves doing is we pay the price for everything priceless.
Yeah, it's total contradiction. But contradiction is reality. There is, you know, everything is, and you know, the lyrics that you've written there show the duality within the physical universe. You know, the sort of one way versus another way. Paying the price for the priceless. That's the sort of the two edges. But think of it in more. Think of it more spherically, if you want to, where you've got two sides there, but there's more sides to it. There's significantly more sides to it.
And that's the journey right there, finding the other sides.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So that was, you know, those lyrics are really, really good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it does help. It would help. Actually, it'll help people to understand what we are. And the duality and the dichotomy or trichotomy or quadropity, if you want to call it that we are everything and nothing in every way, shape or form, concurrently.
We are everything and nothing. It's funny, somebody asked me in the chat room on the last show, hey Chris, what's your ancient name? And I wrote, I don't think anybody picked up on this, but I can reveal it now. I wrote, I am no one, spelled backwards. And that's it. I am no one backwards. So I'm someone, but I'm no one at the same time. Guy, it has been a fascinating discussion. There's so many more places we can go, but I know that it's really early for you and you've been traveling. Do you feel like doing another half hour, or are you out of steam?
Let's carry on till the half of the hour, so we can get your 2 full hours in.
Okay, that's great. Again, there's so many different places we can go. Where would you like to go in the remainder of the time?
Ooh.
I've got plenty of topics. So.
Yeah, well, why don't we look at some of the feed that's coming through and see if we can answer some of the listeners' questions. That'd be useful, I think, for them.
Okay, that sounds great.
Hand it over to them.
Did you go, Cherie? Did you go to the Rotman's question already?
I don't think so. No, the Rotman. Oh, that question. No, I don't think so.
No. Okay. Take us away on that, if you don't mind.
I don't have it. I don't have it copied and pasted.
You don't have the question. Oh, okay. I thought you had sent it to me earlier.
I had another question.
Okay.
That was Cosmo's question. Oh no, that was something completely different. It was a joke that the Rotman told him.
Oh, I see.
thought it was funny.
I'm just seeing the messages.
There is another one that I wanted to bring up, and it's Christy Belly, and she said astrology would not say that we create our own realities. And I know I think we've talked about astrology a few times on the show in the past, but I would like to just say for myself, I disagree there. I think astrology gives you the blueprint of what could happen if certain actions are not taken, or if a person just kind of mindlessly floats along through life without making any substantial changes in their lives, or the way that they behave, or the way they perform, or the friends, the kinds of contacts that they make in their life, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think about astrology being the creation of somebody's reality versus astrology just simply being a blueprint, Guy?
Astrology, in my understanding, is just a way of interacting with the greater reality. We use a number of different methods or rules, for instance, based upon planetary alignment and everything else, and constellation alignment, that presents to us a means of understanding a very high level of information relative to somebody who is born in a specific period within the rotation of those constellations within the physical within our current galaxy, within the physical universe. So it's a bit like tarot cards. It's a bit like crystals. It's an interface medium between us and the gross physical, and the knowledge that we can get when we are in the energetic. But if you look at it from a different perspective, look at it from a programming perspective, if we have a piece of information that says that somebody who's born on a certain date is going to have these certain characteristics, and then we have an expectation that that baby will have these characteristics, then everything we do with that baby for the first 7 years of his life is going to be reinforcing this expectation that that's a blueprint that there will be. So by the time we get to 7, we've already been programmed in terms of our personality by our parents, because they expected us to be a certain type of individual based upon the information surrounding the astrological knowledge about a person who should be, and their personality, what they should be if they're born on the 24th of May, for instance, 1952. So what we have is a sort of a programming based on expectation. So a person's personality is given to them by us, basically, because of an expectation of what they're supposed to be like, because they're born on certain dates. Now, in India, they have they panic about this sort of stuff, because they say, "Oh, I want my baby to be born on an auspicious date." Well, your baby will be born based upon when he's supposed to be born, based upon the physical gestation of the fetus, at the start point being the point of conception. But the energy surrounding because we are everywhere and nowhere, everything is interlinked and interactive with each other. There are certain energies associated with the gross physical that we pick up locally within ourselves and are part of the greater reality. And so there's also a level of the connectivity with the gross physical from the wider sense that is a function of our evolutionary level within the energetic, and that part of it that we brought in with us. So we've got two parts there. They got the programming that comes in as a function of our evolution, our experiences in previous incarnations, and we've got this and the energies surrounding the environment that we're in. The orientation of different stars and different planets within those stars and within the galaxy that we're in. But there's also this expectation of what a person's going to be like, because they've been told that if they're born on this certain date, then they'll have these personality traits, and these personality traits are overlaid upon the newly incarnate soul as a result of the expectation of the parents and those around them. So
we have another question coming in. I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. Was there more to that?
Well, there was one of the people who said that babies aren't born as blank slates. They show their personality in months. That's the overall personality that's come through as part of the soul. There is programming that goes on from there. There's a very old and very true saying: "You give me the baby, and I'll give the baby or the child, and I'll give you the man." Mm-hmm. Yeah? Those first 7 years are super important, because although they have a personality that's comes through with them as a result of their evolutionary content as a sentient entity with an incarnate form, that child will be programmed based upon what their parents do, how they think, behave, and act, and the environment that they're in. And you can see this in a lot of respects, because you can put children from one environment into a different environment, and they will change, provided they are of the right age level. And so you get somebody who's from a very poor family, for instance, in abject poverty, and put them in a rich family at the right age, and they'll start to think, behave, and act as if they've always been in a family that's had a significant advantage. If you put the child that was born into a family of advantage and put them into a family where they're disadvantaged, then they'll start to think, behave, and act in a disadvantaged way. And so it is. It's very much a level of programming, and that programming starts, the moments that the soul starts to associate itself with the fetus. So even when the baby's in the womb, so to speak, you're starting to get the programming of that child. So when you start to see a baby of 3 or 4 months old, you start to see the result of the programming that started the moment that that soul started to associate itself with the fetus.
Michael H. just mentioned something kind of profound. Why are so many people just programs? Are we being left behind? What's going on here? What is your answer?
They're the backdrop people. Yeah. And some of them are both backfill people, which are different. They're those entities of the different level of different genre of sentience that are being allowed to incarnate, so that the population of the Earth is maintained, and those who are capable of going to the next frequency level can ascend to that next frequency level.
Well said. So we have a couple of other questions. One has to do with the recent show that we did with Clyde, which was glitches in the Matrix. Have you noticed any glitches in the Matrix? I'm sure you're familiar with the Mandela effect. Any insight into those phenomenon?
Well, yeah. I mean, the best ways to me to understand, or best way to me to describe an understanding of what a glitch in the matrix is. I mean, this is a very good way of understanding it. But basically, it's to do with continuity of reality. And if you look at the way things have happened in the world, in some instances, the natural continuity of flow of reality has changed dramatically, or has gone into a completely different direction. And you can see that through the actions of certain world leaders, or certain world leaders coming into power. You think to yourself, that should never have happened. How did that happen? It's like we've all been asleep, and all of a sudden the world's changed. And blimey, that person got into power here, and that person's the leader of this organization or that company. It's because we've taken it's a bit like driving a car and falling asleep. When you fall asleep, the car will drive itself, and then if you're lucky, when you wake up, you're still driving the car. But more often than not, it's in the wall somewhere, or embedded in a tree, or another car. So it's really about understanding that the more we don't interact with our environment in the way we should do, the more potential distractions or movements away from the standard or the expected reality stream or event space, so to speak, we will get. So when we get conditions that I can see 3 or 4 that we've experienced in the last 10 years, where we've had so-called reality changes that shouldn't have been there, glitches in the matrix, so to speak, that shouldn't be there. And that's because we don't take responsibility for how we think, behave, and act in this incarnation, which allows opportunities or reality-based changes to come into play that shouldn't come into play, and that creates the glitch in the glitch in the matrix, so to speak, because you start to see a point in our existence where things change dramatically, or changed in a different way that they logically shouldn't have gone into. Or all of a sudden it's like, we feel that things have changed instantaneously, and we can't work out why they've changed, but they have changed, but we can't remember why they've changed, or we can't remember the points that led to the change.
You know what's funny, Guy?
This happens quite a lot.
It's funny how we get into the same frequency, because the entire time you've been speaking, I feel like it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I keep looking at the clock, and it's only 10:30 over here, but it feels like it's 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning for some reason. And I'm thinking to myself, this is so strange, because you've got us inside of your frequency and kind of sharing the same space, even though we're in other parts of the earth. I don't say globe anymore, because that triggers a lot of people. If I say world, that triggers a lot of people. If I say the T word, that triggers a lot of people. The T word, of course, being Trump, and which is you're referring to a lot of that. And it's funny, somebody was arguing me. I said something positive. I made the dire mistake of saying something positive about Trump on Facebook one time, and people jumped all over me, and they're like, "How can you be enlightened and all of this and speak positively of Trump?" And I said, "Look, it's very simple. We're gonna make Ascension great again. That's what we're gonna do." Oh, their head just blew up. Boom.
Well, let me just say that there are positive things for these individuals being in the positions that they're in, and that is to show us what happens when we let go of the steering wheel, and it's to show us that actually we should behave and act in a different way. And so it's almost like sometimes these gremlins are put in the matrix to make us pay attention to controlling the program.
Well, we had a caller a couple days ago, M. Hawkins, who's in the chat right now, and she brought to my attention something I've never heard before. So I guess let me backtrack a little bit. There's a conspiracy theory that Donald Trump is actually a time traveler. It sounds crazy on the surface. However, his uncle was John Trump, who was a physicist who was assigned by the U.S. government in the 70s to go through all of Tesla's research and see if there's anything viable that can be applied for the government. Now, he came back to the government and he said, no, there's nothing to his research. But if he was a physicist who understands government, they were going to use any of the research for weapons, so it was very likely that he would go back and say, no, none of this is viable, while at the same time keeping anything that is viable. Trump mentioned him several times during the during his campaign run, and he said, oh yeah, my uncle, he taught me about energy, he taught me about frequency, he taught me about this and that, etc., etc. He never mentioned who his uncle was. John Trump was his uncle. So the caller that called in yesterday said that he's connected to 777 in so many different ways. On the 777th day of his presidency was tied to the 777th day of Lincoln, and all kinds of stuff. There was like this huge list, and I just did some preliminary research. I just typed in Trump 777 in Google as the caller was speaking, and I found that, for example, something completely random, the Trump page on PBS is page 777. His childhood home is on Airbnb right now, and you can rent it for $777 a night. There's all these different connections to 777. So of course we get into computer simulation and things like that. And the caller brings up the point that in a file system, if you give a folder permission 777, you're essentially allowing access to that entire folder, to anything and everybody, and that Trump has the 777 behind him, and it's almost like a glitch in the matrix, or a program in the matrix that's just tearing down all the walls, giving complete access to everything and everybody, including giving power back to the people and all of this. I don't know how far along the lines I go on that, but the numerology with Trump and 777 is chilling. It's just way too much to ignore. I don't know if you've heard anything like this, but if not, I would say at the very least look into it, because there is something very strange, and Trump is definitely an anomaly. He's something completely unexpected, and something that we've never seen before.
And the same with Boris Johnson as well.
Yeah.
In the UK, so
yes.
they are birds of a feather. Seventh. When he was talking, I was thinking, the seventh son of the seventh son of the seventh son. I don't know if he is, but
the seventh son of the seventh son. It could be
of the seventh son. Yeah. So without doubt, these two individuals and others are in play because we've taken our eye off the ball, and we've been shown what happens when we don't assume responsibility for our incarnation, our environment. And so we've seen that it goes, without our ability to work with things properly and just letting somebody else do what they want to do, we get chaos basically. And so this is like a wake up call for us, because although there's been a lot of people who voted these characters in, there's also a lot of people, and probably the same people as well, are starting to realise it was a bad move. And so what we're being shown now is that if we're complacent, these things, these random things, these individuals who are free radicals basically, can cause a lot of problem. And so, yeah, very good.
Well, this is from a cartoon show that has to do with multiple timelines, and the one at the top is a scientist from one timeline. The other one is the same guy from another timeline, and it's kind of
interesting. Yeah, very good. But basically what we're experiencing here now with these characters and other characters like them is that, we have to be ultimately responsible for those individuals we put in power. And we can't just assume that the right person is going to get in there. I mean, without being too controversial, we have the power to reject the two remaining candidates for a significant governing role and say, actually, although we've got here, they're not what we want. And we have the power to reject it. But we let things go through, don't we? And so this letting it go through because we've followed a process is actually saying that, well, we accept the process is wrong. And so rather than fixing the process and saying, actually, we've got to a point we don't want or didn't expect, let's change the process and therefore reject what the process delivers, we've allowed it to go through. So now what we're doing is we're starting to understand that actually our process is flawed, and we need to be able to change it. But we're only going to be able to change that when the process allows us to. For instance, like the end of a presidency, or the end of a parliament, for instance, which is of course an interesting time. And if you look at the way things have happened, I mean, all the work that's been done to impeach the president, it's failed, hasn't it?
It's not only failed, but I've been watching the impeachment, which I don't really want to talk about because people will start throwing rotten tomatoes. But there is so much corruption being revealed right now. It is unbelievable. Like, everybody knew it was there, but now, I mean, the defense is naming names. Everything that's going on in the Ukraine is all coming to surface. It's totally 100% corrupt. And it's like the impeachment came. They thought they were going to throw a grenade at them, and realistically a nuclear bomb came back to hit them in return, which is it's amazing.
This shows that the level of, shall we say, power that can be created if we do, or the level of control the car's got if we do sit in the back seat rather than the front seat. So it's a case of the longer we leave things to fester, the worse they get. Mm-hmm. So the longer we ignore the issues and relinquish our responsibility and our power individually, the worse the condition gets globally.
That's true. But we can change it. We can change it. We
need to be confident that we can change it, and rather than thinking we can't do anything, we should start to think that we can do something. And that's the way forwards.
Yes, we had a great question, and I lost it. I think I might have copied it, though. I think it's actually on my clipboard. Let me check real quick. Yes, it is. Vibes asked, how do you really exercise that natural ability to create? The things I've manifested haven't stuck around. It seems life wants to have it its own way, so I'm reluctantly going with the flow for now. Your thoughts? You
have to be it. Think it, feel it, be it, know it, taste it every day. So that which you want to create, you have to create your own environment that includes that which you want to create. and eventually you create the energy around yourself, and it happens. It's like being in abundance. If you see yourself in abundance every day, and you know it's going to happen, and you can see the pathway of it happening, then it will happen. Abundance can be a joyful existence. It can be financially abundant. It can be materially abundant. It can be spiritually abundant. Whichever way abundance of friendship, for instance, abundance of friends, an abundance of ideas. If you're an inventor, just meditate on seeing it happen. Don't just think it's going to happen or believe it's going to happen, because a belief system is not robust. It needs to be a knowledge-based experiential system. So just meditate on seeing it being there. Be that which you want. Be in that environment in which your creation exists, and know it's going to exist. And just every time you think about it, it's existing, and then it will exist, and it works. It absolutely works.
Very well said, Guy. Where can people pick up your books and get more of your work? Amazon.com. Look into Amazon.com and just type in Guy Kneedler, and you'll see all the books there. They're in paperback and Kindle versions. The History of God's now an audio book, by the way, which is excellent. But Amazon's the best place. But you can go to Ozark Mountain Publishing. They also sell the books from their website as well. And any of the online bookstores, for instance, Tobias Smithwill, Watkins. I think there's another bookstore that's famous in the US, and I can't remember it now. Over the senior moments. Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes
yes.
and Noble. Yeah, and it's on Nook as well. So it's on all of the major electronic platforms and all of the websites, book selling websites around the world.
Excellent. We really appreciate you, and we have to do this more than every 3 years. And in the future, knowing that, we should have thought about this prior, but we can basically turn on our stream at any time. Yeah. So next show, we're going to have to do an our morning where it's your evening. Right. And the energies are much better. Yeah. But everything has been so fantastic, Guy. And I so greatly appreciate all of your time, especially going above and beyond like that in the middle of the night for us. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And next time, I won't look like the cat's dragged me through the.
We'll have to do video next time for sure.
Yeah.
We love you, brother. And let me also mention this too. I don't know if you recall this, but Cherie was having a surgery several years ago, and you did an energetic healing for her. Mm-hmm. She went into the surgery, which was a laparoscopy, and the doctor came out of the waiting room. He came into the waiting room. I was standing there, and he says, I can't find anything wrong with her. He says, this doesn't make any sense. It's completely gone. We don't need to pull the ovaries out. We don't need to do this and that, etc. It's completely gone. So I don't know if I ever shared that with you, but the energy work you did apparently worked. Yeah. And I've been in awe ever since.
Okay. Well, the work was also partly due to Sherry as well, because she knew it was going to work. She knew the healing was going to work. When you enter into a relationship with a healer or any environment where you know it's going to work, you create that condition. You create that reality. If Sherry had gone into it thinking, well, it might not work, then she would have to have the physical surgery. But because she knew that the healing was going to work, then it worked. And the miraculous removal of the issue happened in the way it's supposed to do. And this is the same way with this person this listener who's talked about how to create. Just know it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Be it, see it, feel it, touch it, taste it, and it's there. It happens. I can turn on and off abundance. It's unbelievable.
We really have the power in this, but like Vibe said earlier, we all get caught up in life, and we all get caught up in the illusion. And the longer we stay in this is the reason why I work with ayahuasca, because the longer I stay in the illusion, the more I begin to believe the illusion is the real. And then the ayahuasca helps me remember, hey, you're living inside of an illusion, and it kind of pulls me out a little bit and kind of gives me kind of a reset point so I can get back to being in the illusion and understanding the illusion. But unfortunately, that's what the illusion does. The longer we stay in it, the realer it becomes. And I went through a situation just recently. It was very, very stressful. As I was going through that stress, it started to manifest into physical symptoms. And as I mentioned earlier, my mother passed away at 56 or 57. 58 at 58 of a stroke. And so I thought to myself, this must be symptoms of a stroke coming on. And my eye was twitching. I was getting this headache that would start in the middle and go out. I was scatterbrained. I felt like the blood in my brain was not flowing properly. And I realized that I was actually manifesting all of these physical symptoms by this stress. And what I was doing is I was becoming more stressed about the physical symptoms. Then the physical symptoms were creating more stress, and then it was a never-ending cycle. And so just taking a small experience and applying it on a life scale, that's essentially what the illusion does to us. The longer we stay in the illusion, the more that we manifest the negative, because we believe that the illusion is real, but it's really not.
Yeah.
So we thank you for your time, Guy. This has been one of the most inspiring shows. Have a wonderful rest of the day and morning, please.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
And great work, guys. Keep going. Keep doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to point out that, see, the reason why I went into that surgery was because I've had problems with ovarian cysts for years and years and years since I was a teenager. And frankly, I haven't had a single problem with ovarian cysts since he did that healing. Not a single problem.
It's
Never
true.
came up again.
It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It was pretty amazing. And Guy is a very, very amazing person.
Yeah.
We can't let this much time go without connecting with our friends.
Yeah.
We had the whole revelation in August of 2017 with the eclipse, and that kind of took Beyond the Veil in a different direction. We didn't have guests for a long time, because we had so much to talk about ourselves. Yeah. But I'm glad that we're coming back in 2020 and rebalancing everything. So. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take another quick break. Maybe chit-chat a little bit afterwards, too. I'm not sure if we're going to wrap it up or not. I don't know.
I'm fine with keeping on going.
Are you really?
I am.
Oh, wow.
I'm good.
I'm pinching myself. I think I might be dreaming. We will be right back.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Am I interrupting? Thought you might be running low.
Pour yourself a glass, pal.
Thank you, but I'm afraid it would be wasted on me.
I think we wasted our time coming here, don't you?
Your question depends on me understanding what you hope to achieve by coming here.
What we hope to achieve was to meet our makers, get answers, why they even made us in the first place.
Why do you think your people made me?
We made you because we could.
Can you imagine how disappointing it would be for you to hear the same thing from your creator? May I ask you something?
Please do.
How far would you go to get what you came all this way for? Your answers. What would you be willing to do?
Anything and everything.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth!
I am the hub of the wheel, the origin of all life, the devourer of death.
Or maybe you're just hungry. Could it be as simple as that?
I made you, and I will unmake you if I become so inclined.
Oh, I see you now as you truly are. A cancer, a spooling parasite burrowed deep in the heart of this world.
Go now. Play out your pitiful rebellion and take your place among the destroyed, the used, and the damned. But know this. You are a puny creature, more fragile than you realize.
I wonder, Old One, did you truly resurrect me, or were you simply there when I awakened from my torment in the abyss? All the conflict and strife throughout history, all the fear and hatred, served but one purpose: to keep my master's wheel turning. The coin is still turning. All souls were prisoners, trapped in the pointless this round of existence, leading distracted, blunted lives until death returned them, always in ignorance, to the wheel. But what hope had they then?
There is no escape.
It was then I knew what I had to do. I alone could end this. And it was then I saw.
So, I am revealed to you at last.
What in hell?
I am the origin of life, the devourer of death. I am the hub of the wheel, the purifying cycle to which all souls must be drawn. You would be wise to heed me.
Your words are hardening. For you would not fear us unless we could truly do you harm.
No! You are nothing!
False God. This is the end. The final turn of your wheel.
Fellow traveler, the cries of the mystery speak again, bidding organic consciousness a welcome to the House of Light. The great institution of materialism has failed. The false civilization built by man has turned, like a monster destroying its creator. Science battles itself impotently against the barriers of the unknown. Only your consciousness knows the true path. You, the illuminated, can carry the understanding upwards towards the light. Only your consciousness can teach the children of men to live well, to die well, and in perfect measure, be born again, through the knowledge of virtue, compassion, love, and true understanding, as you are sublimely raised, beyond the veil.
All right, let's jump back into it. Huh?
That was a little bit, there's a space there, and you're like, all right.
Oh, no, I was saying goodnight to Jason Crump. Yeah. Everybody's so loving in the chat today.
Yeah, they are.
They usually are, and this really is a tribe.
People.
That's what people have been saying in the chat. And somebody said earlier, thank you for creating such a loving space. And what I was thinking is, well, all we did is just set the environment, but you guys and gals are the ones that are creating the living space out there.
Yeah, you are.
And it's everything is becoming harmonious. Things were a little bit chaotic, at least for me energetically, for a while, but it's all coming back to a place of balance and harmony and unity and all of that. So yeah, everything is united, but at the same time individual, which I think I've failed to see in the past, because we have the whole source consciousness idea, the whole idea that we come from source, that we're going to merge back with source and all of that, and I recognize that as a deception right off the bat, but we do have an element of unity, because it's about maintaining your individuality, but again, it's about coming together at the same time. So it's everything and nothing at the same time. It's up and down at the same time. It's left and right at the same time. And it brings me back to the idea, again, of balance. It's all about balance. We have to balance the consciousness and the body and the mind, and we have to enjoy ourselves in life too. We can't constantly focus on consciousness or truth stuff and things like that. We have to take care of the 3D. But when we take care of the 3D, we also take care of the higher consciousness part. And maybe that's the whole purpose of the game. That's the whole purpose of life, is to find the balance. That's the exit point, in my opinion, when we find the balance.
You know, Ricky said, anyone have anything on soul group reincarnation and ties with them in past and present lives? I think that's exactly what we're doing here on Beyond the Veil. We're reconnecting with our tribe. And you guys are people that we've known not just in past lives here, but perhaps even outside of the simulation. We're all kind of related to each other, not family, but we're all part of the same tribe. And we all reconnect towards the end of the simulation. And that's part of it. And I wouldn't say that we come from source consciousness, or that we're all fractals of each other or anything like that, but rather we all have the same makeup spiritually. We all have that same spark of maybe a particular color, and we all wear those colors in our hearts or in our souls. And we're all drawn together in a sense. So I think that's what it means. That
is very true. It's been an interesting journey, and it's been a journey of trying to find the door and trying to find the way out. And it's like I'm coming to the realization that it's not about finding the door, because the door has always been right in front of us. It's about finding how to open the door. Now it's like, okay, well, how do you open it? And it's like a seesaw. Maybe it's like that movie Saw, you're inside of that game and you're like, you got to get out, and there's only one way out. And sometimes you got to do some horrible things, like dig the key out of your arm and stuff like that. It's all, this Matrix is unfortunately like that. But, the point is, though, that it's about that one point. It's about, as things are tipping back and forth and finding that point right there, that's when the door opens. But, we can run all around the game and look for the door, or we can just figure out, well, it's about making the door open by just being balanced. And
a lot of it, too, if you notice, well, not in the later films that aren't really Jigsaw, but the ones that are Jigsaw, there's two elements that a lot of people don't really get. And number one is that when you think it's okay to sacrifice somebody else or let somebody else feel the pain so that you don't have to, you usually pay for it later. Like, oh crap, if I had just let them live, if I had just cut my own arm off or whatever so that they could escape with me, then we would have the two people that are necessary to unlock this next door.
Well, it reminds me of one of the films, and it's so funny. Only on Beyond the Veil will we find deeper meaning and gnosis behind the film series Saw.
Well, it's true, though. It's true.
Will we find allegories to apply it?
Well, let me say the second thing.
Well, let me say this real quick. It reminds me of this one. I don't remember which one it was, but it was the one with Mark Wahlberg, or Wahlberg. I don't remember how to pronounce the name. But
Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg. They tell him at the very beginning, your son is in a safe place, and there's a safe right behind him. And you don't even realize there's a safe right behind him, but you can see it clearly in the shot. He says, your son is in a safe place. And just wait, you have 2 hours, and he'll be in this safe place. And he runs around through this whole game, and he's going through all this and going through all this torturous stuff and everything like that. And at the end, his son was standing right behind him in that safe. And if he had just waited still right there in that place, the safe would have opened by itself. But instead, he went through the whole thing, and he found himself stuck inside of the game and eventually died, I think, at the end of the game. But if he would have just stayed still and just waited, the safe would have opened right behind him.
Right.
It's very allegorical. I mean, I don't think it was written like that, but you can kind of apply the allegory. We're running around like crazy playing all these different games when in reality, all we have to do is just sit still, just wait and find the balance, and the door will open.
Well, and the second thing I was going to say is it teaches you about karma, in general. In Jigsaw's games, it was always people who had either let somebody die selfishly for selfish reasons, or absolutely, were responsible for a person's death in some way. And so you have to kind of admit to yourself, okay, I did something wrong, and because of that, I have to kind of go through this painful process in order to balance out, just like you were talking about, balance all the scales out so that I can make it out of here alive. And somebody, Cosmos, said, I'm afraid I'm an NPC / walk-in / or worse. And I just want to say, I don't think anyone who would be even remotely interested in this kind of material or even remotely interested in bettering themselves spiritually would be an NPC. And I liken it to a toaster or a computer. You tell your toaster it's a piece of crap, it doesn't care. If you tell your computer, oh, you're just a computer program, they don't care. They're just going to shrug and, keep doing what they were doing. It's not, if it bothers a person to call them an NPC, then that tells me that they have the emotional depth to realize whether or not they have that capacity or not.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I question my own existence all the time. And
Yeah, I think we all do.
I ask myself if I'm a computer program, if I'm an antivirus program that was deployed into the Matrix and given a backstory of an existence outside of the Matrix in order to play out this function, which is to remove the virus from the system. What happens when the virus is removed from the system? What happens to the program that's removing the virus itself? If the program, the antivirus program, is part of the system in and of itself, I question that all the time. I think the NPCs are usually the ones that go, no, there's no way I can be an NPC. There's no possible way. No, I am real and I know I'm real. So yeah, I think we have to consider that too, that pondering the question is, Underground King, Under K King. I don't know why I always call him Under K King. Underground King. I think it's because he's from Houston. It's that got a pocket full of stones and they won't leave my ass alone. I'm draped up and dripped out. Know what I'm talking about? 3 a.m, getting the gat out the stash spot. Fire up a fat sweet, turning on the bud light. Ass on and hands on the wood grain. Ass on the tight white. Anyway,
I don't think
I totally diverted back into my 20s there, but you Houston people will know what I'm talking about, the real ones anyways. So what he said is Chris is the virus, and it depends on the perspective. If you're in an infected machine, then the antivirus would be the virus in and of itself, and the machine would work to expel the antivirus. So there you go.
That's true. Yeah. I think it's wrong to assume that somebody's an NPC if they tell you I'm not an NPC. That's like calling somebody a murderer. And it's like, how do you prove a negative, And it's...
Why is it so bad to be an NPC, though? Why?
Well, because that means you don't have any ability to leave this matrix. It means that your entire reality is stifled and it's condensed into this one simulation.
Well, at some level, we must also be condensed to our reality.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
but
we can build simulations and jump into the simulations that we build, but
it's used as a slur rather than. I mean, I think we shouldn't be even focused on other people. I think we should be focused on ourselves and what we're doing instead of judging and throwing that around in order to make someone feel bad. Mm-hmm. I think it's unnecessary. That's just how I feel.
Christy Belly.
I'm an NPC.
A really good topic, but we'll get to that here in just a minute. But I do want to, the NPC thing. We were on with Osset, and Osset was one of the only people that actually got it. There's nothing wrong with NPC. Like I said on that show, we are the invaders in this system. This is their world. This isn't our world.
Right.
We're the foreigners in here.
But we can make choices. Organic consciousness can make choices. And calling someone an NPC means that they're completely bound to their programming and there's no way out and they can never be different than what they are right now. And I don't think that that's possible. for somebody that wants to be better, that wants to progress, that wants to be more than they are right this moment. I don't think it's possible for them to be an NPC, and I think a lot of people have been called NPCs that aren't, So anyways, somebody said something pretty interesting too.
Can you help me deal with the long dark night of the soul after 26 years of Islamic programming? And realistically, I just want to preface it by saying this: there's no real difference between Islamic programming and Christian programming and Judeo programming. It's all the same. It all comes from the Torah. What happened is that Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, and the Jews believe that Isaac was taken up to the mountain to be sacrificed, and so they follow his bloodline. The Muslims believe that it was Ishmael that was taken up to the mountain to be sacrificed. But realistically, it all comes down to I'm thinking of a video we did that's actually really good. I might play it. It all comes down to worship of the God of a man who was willing to sacrifice his own children. Yeah. Which, when you just see it for what it is, without all the religious propaganda and programming and everything behind it, you realize just how screwed up that is. Like, the most revered man in all of these religions is a man that was willing to murder his own children. So we're all talking about the God of Abraham, which is Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah. Allah is merely Arabic for God. In Greek, they call him Theos because it's Greek. And in Spanish, I think it's Dios. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's all really the same thing. So once we realize that, then we realize it's the same program that's being run on people, but just for different places of the world, different cultures, and also it keeps people divided as well. So you run the Judaic program versus think of the Judaic program. They're the chosen ones. They're God's chosen people. What the fuck kind of racist shit is that? It's like, get that shit out of here. You want to scream anti-Semitic and all this bullshit, and you claim to be God's chosen people? Like, your DNA is better than everyone else. That's what you're claiming? Then you're screaming anti-Semitism? Well, no wonder people are anti-Semitic. They're calling out your bullshit of being God's chosen people. What kind of bullshit is that? Anyways, it's something I've held in myself for a long time. I've never really vocalized it like that. But really, when you think about that, you think about exactly how ridiculous it is. But so many people fall for it. I have a friend who recently broke her religious programming as well, and she's going through a very similar time of breaking through the deprogramming herself too. And the only thing that I can think of is to realize that we have many different chapters in life. And, each chapter brings us to where we are now. I remember breaking my truther programming, and it felt like it was a part of me that was dying, because it was. But at the same time, I remember when Cherie and I were talking about this and realizing that a lot of the truther stuff we used to talk about was kind of BS. We were thinking, oh my God, we're going to lose our audience. People are going to think, this and that and blah, 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 blah. And when we had to make the decision, like, what would we rather do? Would we rather go down the real truth path, even though it was contrary to the truther path? Or do we want to continue to propagate whatever people wanted to hear? And I remember I read a list of 10 conspiracy theories that actually are not true. And it backed up with fact and everything like that. Conspiracy quotes that, nobody will enter the New World Order without taking a Luciferian initiation and all that. And then we found out that guy, David Spangler, he was never part of the UN. The UN group, I I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but that supposedly he was with the New Age group for the UN group of New Age, One World Religion or something like that. Doesn't even exist. He was tied to the UN vaguely because his company or his organization had printed some documentation that was printed by the same printing company that printed for the UN. You know, there were all these different things that, you know, so like really like by 33 degrees of separation, things were tied in together to make this quote, and it's paraded around as conspiracy fact. Just on the show the other day, I pissed off a few people that I noticed in the chat room that when I said that Sophia Stewart didn't actually win the lawsuit for The Matrix, even though it's propagated around as conspiracy fact that she wrote The Matrix and won the lawsuit. And I'm like, well, it doesn't, you know, I mean, I could tell you the it's funny. I have another song that I'm working on that I've got over at the engineer. It says, should I show you the flowers and the sweet smelling fruits, or should I tell you the truth about the poisonous roots? Should I build a glass house so you can throw stones, or should I light up the path so you can find your way home? And it's about this very topic that we're talking about here, that you know, a lot of people want to just hear what they want to hear and what feels good to them, and it's not really about the truth. And we've had to make this decision so many times in our journey of saying, well, we're going to go with the truth where the truth leads, even though it's contrary to public opinion. Likewise, that is most applied to religion, because you come to the realization, hey, this is all programming, it's all BS, and it's BS, both bullshit and belief system in and of itself. And then what you're faced with when you go through that is your peers, who are the ones, it's like, I call it crabs in a bucket syndrome, where it's a crab that's getting out of the bucket, and then the rest of the crabs are pulling that other crab back in and trying to keep that crab in the bucket. You know, we see that here still, even to this time. The thing is, I've gone through this process so many times that when people get all upset about a fact, something that's truthful, I've got such thick skin, and it's like I've become like a duck where the water just kind of just falls right off of me. But I understand going through that, especially with religious programming, is so difficult to break free of, because you've spent 26 years surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And because you have, now all of a sudden it seems like your entire world is just falling apart, because everybody around you is still inside of that belief system, and they're trying to pull you back into that belief system, trying to pull you back. And religion is the most toxic and vile of all of the programmings, in my opinion, because you are threatened with eternal damnation if you're wrong. And the thing that I ask myself is, if I'm wrong in everything I know, and if there is a God of Abraham, is he really, or it, going to send me to hell to suffer for eternity because I followed my heart, because I followed the truth wherever it may have led? Because even if I was wrong, I was pure in my heart and pure in my intention to find the truth, despite anything that people are telling me, or any of the programming, or any of the pressure. Is that the kind of God that exists? And if so, fuck him. Okay, I'd rather go burn in hell than worship this thing that would actually send me to hell for being wrong, even though I'm true. That's not the way any kind of benevolent being, or not benevolent, divine being would react. And understanding my own divinity, and understanding what it means to be divine, because we do have our own divinity within us, I understand the closer we tap into our divinity, the further away we get from judgment, the further away from judging others, the further away we get from wanting to control others. You know, divinity is about compassion, it's about love, and that compassion and love isn't necessarily displayed. What happened there? My screen's just went blank. I hope that the string didn't drop. with that? Nope. Okay, cool.
No, it
We're still on.
didn't. Okay.
So, so divinity is about compassion and love, but love and compassion isn't necessarily about, oh, I love you and that's it. Sometimes you love people by disconnecting from them. Sometimes you've got to let people fall in order for them to get back up. You know, compassion is also about having compassion and love for yourself as well. So the closer you get to divinity, the more you realize that that's the case. And the more you realize that as you begin to ascend metaphorically, which I think is just getting closer to your own divinity, to your raw consciousness, the more you ascend into your divinity, the more you realize that you have to have understanding and compassion for those who haven't, and for those who are still very young on their path. And you also start to understand, because you've broken so many different kinds of programs, that there's programmings that exist and some people are just trapped in those programs. So are you as a divine being going to send somebody to hell for eternity for being wrong or being stuck in one of the programs that exist within this matrix that you were a part of yourself as well? So when I started to ask myself all of these different questions about this God entity, I realized, no, this thing, number one, is a son of a bitch, and number two, has absolutely no power whatsoever. So I hope that helps to answer the question of dealing with that long dark night of the soul. But that's there's a lot to consider there. And so what I would do at this point is just kind of take a step back and I'm reading the chat here.
I think a lot of it is realizing
take
your worth.
Take a step back and understand that the people around you are still stuck in the same program that you're just breaking.
Right. And that you're worth more than what all religions say that you are. All of the Abrahamic religions insist that you're a wretch, you're lower than dirt, or you are made of dirt, and that, the dust of the earth you come from and the dust of the earth you shall return. It's awful. And you're worth way more than that. Your consciousness is worth way more than that. And Loa had a really interesting question that I wanted to cover.
Well, before we get to that, let me say this too about religion. I've realized that it has a purpose and it has a place, because these NPCs need a program to run. The program that they're running right now is very toxic, but they need that. They need to be told, don't kill. They need to be told, don't rape. They need to be told things like that. The programs tell them that that's okay, though, and justify all of that, which is why the scripts are all screwed up. But at the core of it, what religion was supposed to do is keep the NPCs in line and keep them from killing each other, and ultimately keep them from killing us, because they can't come to these realizations.
That's doctrinal programming. And, that's how you kind of know an NPC from an OC2, is the fact that they have to follow that programming. They have to reproduce. They have to follow that religious doctrine, not because it's right or because it's good, but because it says so. And because that's what you do. And there's no real explanation for
it's like government. When I first came to the realization of government, I realized I'm a sovereign being. My life has value. I'm a human being. God damn it. I realized I'm a sovereign being, and there is no government that has a right to control me. And so my instinct was anarchy. And not anarchy in the chaotic sense, but anarchy, and what gives another being a right? But then, especially as things have devolved over the last several years since Trump was elected, I realized the importance of having a system of control for those who cannot control themselves. And there are many, 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 many people out there that don't have the ability to control themselves. And this is why government was instituted to begin with, to keep them under control. It's become parasitic, and that's the big problem right there. But those people definitely need somebody to control them, because they're not controlling themselves. So again, the more you tap into your divinity, the more you ascend, the more you start to see from an even bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger perspective. And I think that's where you'll find your journey heading to. So go ahead with the question.
She said, If one is leaving the earth through walk-in route like me, does one leave the matrix completely, or will I still exist in it? I've been wondering about this question for a long time. So essentially she's asking, are you asking when you leave this earth and you've been a walk-in and you've walked into a body and you're leaving now, such as, like Chris, if Chris thinks he's a walk-in, possibly.
I don't know.
Whenever you leave, whenever you leave this plane, this simulation, do you leave the matrix completely? I don't think we're ever in the matrix completely. I think our true bodies are out there, and we wake up in a pod or wake up in a location where as almost as if we're awakening from a really messed up dream. And I really believe that, based on what I've experienced, what others have experienced that I trust and that I love. I think that that's the case. And it's, I hate to bring up the show again, but in Travelers, it's just like that. They, put the consciousness, take it from the future and put it inside of a body that is about to die anyway. So it's not like they're taking anybody's life. And then whenever that body dies, the consciousness goes back out and re-enters the future. And that's why some of them have lived for hundreds of years in the future. And they just keep coming back and coming back and coming back into the past. I think it's the same kind of applies, where we come back into a body here, and when we're done, we go back out, and we don't have to stay in this matrix. And I think that's another thing that differentiates OC from NPC, is that NPCs don't have any reference point to turn to for their consciousness, and so they've kind of created one with heaven and hell and purgatory and all of these, locations that they go to after they die.
I don't know. I know one thing for sure, that the corrupted systems have corrupted the entire matrix and have caused everything to be way more dense than it needs to be, which makes the game not only lose its fun and meaning, but, these systems were here for a reason. I think one of the other reasons these systems were put into place is because it makes the game fun to play. I mean, you come in completely and totally mind wiped. Your purpose is to remember who you are and break the barriers that have been placed over you. If it wasn't for those barriers, then what would the purpose be? I mean, like the truth. It's funny, that same song I was referencing earlier, it starts out, sometimes I wonder if some truth should be hidden. Should I lie by omission so you won't hate me for wisdom? I broke you out of your cell, but you won't leave the prison of politics and religion that keeps us locked in submission. Should I show you the flowers and the sweet tasting fruits, or should I tell you the truth about the poisonous roots? Should I build a glass house and let you throw stones, or should I light up the path so you can find your way home? All that came from understanding that the truth is hidden for a reason, because finding the truth is what makes the truth valuable. It creates its value there, because now you as a conscious being have gone through the process of breaking through the illusion. And when you break through the illusion, then you know that it's an illusion. You know the truth. But if I tell you you're living in an illusion, that doesn't mean anything to you. But if you find it for yourself, like the whole truther path, it was my desire to really find the truth that made me break down all of these fake conspiracies and go way beyond there. If I hadn't, though, I'd still be stuck there. But it was breaking all that down. So that actually served a purpose to help to elevate me and help me to ascend to higher levels. If those blocks weren't there, there would be no higher levels to ascend to. If some Like I remember people coming onto the show. Dennis McKenna was one of them. And he said, there is no new world order. He said, it's just a bunch of people just clutching at straws, trying to grasp some kind of control. And he said, there is no big one agenda or anything like that. And I thought to myself, that's absolutely ridiculous. Are you some kind of shill? What's going on here? All those thoughts went through my head. But then when I came to that realization myself and I saw it for myself, then all of a sudden, it all started to to make sense. And it made sense about what the next steps of the journey were after that. So yeah, take that for what it's worth. And especially religion. That was the big thing. You were in Islam for 26 years because you were supposed to break those chains later on. Now that you've broken those chains, what you're finding afterwards is that much more meaningful, that much more valuable. It's solidified within you that much more than and I'm sure people came along and told you during that 26 years, this is bullshit, this is bullshit, this is bullshit, and you just immediately dismissed it. It was you that had to go through the process to find that out for yourself.
I don't think that the mind wipe is necessary. And let me tell you why. I think for organic consciousness, a mind wipe is similar to playing. This matrix is similar to playing Skyrim, where it's a lot of fun, and you get to collect knowledge, you get to collect items, you get to collect quests, and you become stronger and stronger and stronger. Even if you die, you respawn, and you not only remember everything, you don't have to go through all those quests over and over and over again. You get to continue where you were, 20 minutes earlier. It's just, okay, well, I'll remember this time that dragon is there and that he's hard to beat. I think the mind wipe was a result of the virus, and that because of the mind wipe, we've kind of been running around in circles, and every time we die, we just get flushed right back through the system as if none of it happened. We might still, retain a little bit of memory from the previous incarnation, but all in all, we're a blank slate over and over and over again, and there's been a lot of wasted time throughout the last 10,000 years because of that. And I think we wouldn't make the same mistakes that we seem to keep making every single time if we could remember. And so that's where I stand on that. I do think that this game is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a journey, but it's not supposed to make you forget about the journey and give you that disadvantage right off the bat. I don't think that whoever created this matrix meant for it to be like that.
Very well said.
So, Ricky wants you to play another one of your songs.
I think I want to wrap it up.
Oh, you want to wrap it up?
I've been preaching a little too much.
Okay. I think probably I have too. Oh, Lois said thank you for addressing the question.
Okay.
You're welcome.
So
we love you guys.
Let's leave it on a positive note. A positive note is that we're all exactly where we need to be. Yep. So 2020 and beyond, we're moving in a much, much, much higher frequency. So kiss the one you love right now, because you never know when the last time is going to be, and we'll see you even further.
Beyond the veil.
Beyond the veil.